April 8, 1996 Wrestling Observer Newsletter. WrestleMania with Bret Shawn Iron Man match review and fallout. Future of Bret. World Wrestling Peace Festival lineup. Tons more. By Observer staff. Wrestling Observer Newsletter. P.O. Box 1228, Campbell, California 950091228. April 8, 1996. There are many questions left coming out of WrestleMania. But the biggest and most important one concerns the future of Bret Hart. After the Germany tour, which ends on April 22 and with the possible exception of a week of May bookings in Kuwait, Hart is expected to go on a hiatus until at least the end of the summer. There has already been a lot of talk of a Shawn Michaels vs. Bret Hart rematch at SummerSlam, perhaps in a ladder match. There has also been a lot of talk that Hart may not return that quickly, or even at all. Retirements in pro wrestling are a funny thing. Like most everything else in a world based on a lie and run by people who use the phraseology workers to describe themselves, and also use the term work as a euphemism for lie, it should come as no surprise that 99% of pro wrestling retirement angles are just that, angles. Some are 100% angles all the way across, like the current deal with Diamond Dallas Page, not even meant to fool anyone or even be a sleazy way to sell tickets, even though it is a work just the same, but just to be another chapter in a storyline. Others, like with Ric Flair, were done exactly as a sleazy way to sell a pay-per-view, apparently attempting to fool everyone, or perhaps was even a storyline that would end up as reality, even though plans were being made for when and how he would return before he was even retired in the first place. The funny part about some is that some of the other wrestlers who take part in retirement storylines may have actually meant it at the time, but as time goes on, the bug gets to them, and the lure of the green or the cheers does as well, and presto, for the 30th time, here's Verne Gagne or Roddy Piper or Atsushi Onita coming out of retirement to save the day. Bret Hart appears to be an altogether different breed. Actually, the word retirement is a misnomer in this situation, even if by some small chance he actually never returns. This appears to be twofold: taking a summer off to attempt to pursue life after pro wrestling and an acting career, and a calculated business maneuver. History shows us, with people like Roddy Piper, Terry Funk and Hulk Hogan among others, that people who leave the pro wrestling business to go into acting usually end up back in pro wrestling, even if they have no intention of doing so when they make the first leap. The other end is the future of Bret Hart. History has shown us a career of a guy who comes a lot closer to filling the shoes of Bret's self-professed best there was, best there ever will be, although best there is taking today into account would be a stretch, of our generation, named Ric Flair. Flair turned 47 a little more than a month ago. For those into giving credibility to wrestling trivia and history, one of the more mind-boggling facts when it comes to history of the most recognized world title to me was the idea that Lou Thesz held the NWA World Heavyweight title until the age of 49. The idea that a worldwide organization, the biggest of its kind at the time, would have a 49-year-old man as world champion, while certainly saying volumes about the respect Thesz had in those days, is staggering in a business of this type. That strange historical fact of a man that age holding the championship is unlikely to be duplicated by Flair, because he'd have to be champion 2 years from now. But 5 years ago, who would have bet a nickel that in 1996, Flair would hold the title? Flair has been written out, phased out, fired, buried and resurrected as champion so many times that the number of times, once of paramount importance, is a statistic nobody cares about anymore. But the most important part of the Flair legacy post-1989, the first time the marketing geniuses decided he was too old to be the focal point of the company, is his career since that time. By fluke, desperation and so many other reasons, after failures on top, they go back to the guy who can play the role of a wrestling champion better than almost anyone else, and he's held the world title more times after those in the know felt it was time to discard him than he did during the decade of the 80s when he was the premier performer in the game. Bret Hart today is Ric Flair in the days after the 1990 Great American Bash, when Sting beat Flair to end Flair's last title reign and to start Sting's legacy as Hulk Hogan South perennial world champion. And a great deal of the next 6 years of Bret Hart's life, whether his wrestling career will in any way follow the pattern of the guy he so openly knocks, will probably be determined over the next few months. According to what Hart has told people, besides the attempts at acting gigs, there is a business method to his madness. As is the case whenever somebody new gets their chance to be in the position where all the spotlight shines on them, plenty of people come up with plenty of reasons, some valid, some silly, as to why that person or the business built around that person will self-destruct. So this is the week for all the reasons Shawn Michaels or WWF business with Michaels on top will self-destruct. Hart probably knows those reasons in his sleep and no doubt fervently believes them. But nobody really knows the validity of any of those reasons until they are tested over time. There are those within the WWF thinking it'll be a matter of weeks before those reasons begin to play themselves out, such as Michaels' track record when it comes to frequent hiatuses. Others, citing Michaels' return after his most recent hiatus and WWF's business turnaround coinciding directly, feel this is the beginning of a new era of flourishing business. If it's the former, and Hart sticks around and business starts sliding, he may be Ric Flair, but like Flair in all those circumstances, he won't be any kind of a savior, just a stopgap measure as Flair always was after the pretenders to the crown didn't cut it. If he isn't around and business isn't good with Michaels as champion, and judging from how everything looks today, there are no signs business at least in the short term shouldn't be very good, then he can take no blame and can be brought back with the big return hype that made people forget just how unsuccessful Jim Hellwig was when the spotlight shone on him. In other words, if Michaels screws up or business goes down, and Hart is on hiatus, when they call him up to ask him back to save the day, part of that phone call will likely be to beg him to take the belt, the prop he takes so seriously. If he's around and things screw up, they may look to find another Diesel. Hart has also told people that if things don't screw up and Michaels does become the next great drawing card in pro wrestling, then he doesn't see any place for him in the WWF. And he's told people point blank he'll never, and never is another of those funny words in pro wrestling, go to WCW. The fact its big guns include Flair, who Hart has made a number of stinging statements about, and its most powerful force is Hogan, who the same can be said about, makes the political waters shark-infested even if he didn't have that attitude and wanted to go swimming in Atlanta. Certainly the way the title change went down, with Hart having the sharpshooter in at the bell after going 60 minutes to a no-falls draw, and then being sent into a surprise sudden death period with almost a fluke quick title change pinfall, allows Hart the perfect opportunity to do his believable interviews about being screwed by authority to hype a rematch. By all rights, a rematch, whenever it takes place, should do a big buy rate. That's the funny thing. Hart takes this stuff so seriously. That's his strength in putting together great matches, sometimes with mediocre opponents, at least on the big shows when it counts. He really believes he's better than Flair was at his peak, and it drives him crazy when there are people don't have the same assessment. He really believes Michaels isn't in his league and went out to make his point in the build-up and during the match at WrestleMania. Like Flair and Michaels, he really believes the belt is something more than a prop as part of matches where winners and losers are determined by the guy who does the fixing. And the best way to get it back is to disappear when things are going bad. They'll always be able to come back. But not with the prop. Unless Michaels ends up as a pretender. The WWF's self-proclaimed greatest title match in history on March 31st in Anaheim, California was an interesting 62 minutes. Live, despite post-show proclamations and testimonials, the crowd was largely dead for the majority of the match. Quite frankly, it was downright boring live unless one was sitting in the bottom rung of the building where the hardcore WWF maniacs, many of whom traveled from around the country, were. The rest of the crowd seemingly came for the special pageantry of WrestleMania, which was non-existent, or to see the return of the Ultimate Warrior, which was barely existent but blew the roof off the place. It was more like a regular house show than a major event, with the exception of the Roddy Piper Goldust, although a very well-produced house show. Fans were leaving the building during the main event. To say they were leaving in droves would be an overstatement, but there were probably a few thousand empty seats by the time the match reached its climax, and the pop for the title win couldn't compare with major babyface world title wins of the past. The fans from the upper deck, who appeared to enjoy the match the least, started booing early, starting at the 6:45 mark of the match when they went back to the mat after a quick high spot. There was little heat during the first half of the match, and long lines at the snack bar since people knew the match had a long way to go. While purists would say this would have been a great Budokan Hall main event, and it would be from a psychology and execution standpoint, although not from a stiffness standpoint, this wasn't Budokan, and fans who came to the first house show of their lives didn't know the various submission holds or understand working a body part, concepts that had never been put across on WWF television. But they did start figuring out about 30 minutes in that there weren't going to be any falls taken. The first time it appeared to click was when Michaels kicked out of a piledriver, which got an initial big pop, but lingering boos. At that point, after every kick out of a near fall, instead of the Japanese pop, the reaction was boos, not vociferous but very noticeable. Then after going through 60 minutes, finishing a match with a superkick after a sudden death period that went 152 was way too fast. The lack of a build for the finish, after 60 minutes of what was supposed to have been nothing but building, was poor booking. Don't take any of this as a knock on either Hart or Michaels. After watching the same match on television and concentrating more on their performance as opposed to the crowd's reaction to the performance, it was an excellent match. Good enough to live up to the tagline that was created for it before the match had ever started about it being the greatest title match in the history of the WWF? No way. Good enough to live up to the obvious comparisons to the Flair Steamboat match in New Orleans in 1989? No way again. Comparable to the mid-1990s state-of-the-art 60 Minutes match of Kenta Kobashi vs. Toshiaki Kawada last year? Not in its league. It was more on the level of a Ric Flair 60-minute title defense in the mid-80s, but in style and substance, against a second-tier challenger or a Flair title defense against a top-tier worker. Steamboat, Wyndham, when they were just a tad below their major show kick-ass performance. Maybe a shade better than mid-80s 60-minute classics like Jumbo Tsuruta vs. Riki Choshu or Antonio Inoki vs. Tatsumi Fujinami. Although every one of the aforementioned matches got over live a hell of a lot better. The crowd itself was pretty mixed, with neither wrestler ever getting booed heavily, although Hart did a few things done to elicit boos and got some boos. The Hart fans were more fervent than the Michaels fans, in that there were chants of "Let's go Bret" started, but they never were picked up on to any degree, but there were no "Let's go Shawn" chants, even though it was Michaels who was selling most of the way. And as the main event went, so went the show. It came off as nothing special live and actually a major letdown. While watching on pay-per-view, it came off as a damn good show. That probably explains the mixed reaction in the poll and the many votes for Roddy Piper vs. Goldust, which was excellent for what it was, but by no means the match Hart vs. Michaels was, for best match. WrestleMania 12 at the Arrowhead Pond in Anaheim, California drew a crowd of 15,855, announced on television as 18,852, with 12,909 paying $737,440. It was far from the largest crowd, but it was the largest gross ever for pro wrestling west of the Rockies, breaking the mark set by the Hogan Slaughter WrestleMania at the Los Angeles Sports Arena in 1991 that did $722,035. It wasn't the largest crowd of the year, but it was the biggest gross of the year in the Western Hemisphere since last year's WrestleMania. The ticket windows were selling tickets at least as late as a few minutes before the show started, and we received reports of people in the parking lot area handing out free tickets a half hour before the show started. Even at its peak, before the place emptied out during the main event, there were a few hundred empty seats. Perhaps the most impressive stat of the night was that they did $176,061 in merchandise, which is a Japanese like $11.11 per person, which is better than the traditional WrestleMania figure of $9 per head. The Bodydonnas, Chris Candido and Tom Pritchard, won the WWF tag titles in the tournament final over the Godwins, Mark Canterbury and Dennis Knight, in 5:21. The finish saw Phineas set up Skip for the slop drop, but Sunny lifted up her skirt to give a panty shot and he was stunned. This allowed Skip to come from behind with a schoolboy for the win. The best spot of the match was Skip being monkey flipped over the top rope, and he did a flip on the way over, crashing onto Zip. Henry is a passable worker, but Phineas is pretty bad. 1 star. Nacho Man, Huckster, Billionaire Ted and the Skid all died within seconds. The air-to-tape segment of a high school gym filled with nothing but senior citizens. An even older Huckster came to the ring with a walker and expired. Nacho Man tried to climb the ropes and fell off and also expired. They managed to quickly work in women's shoe, chair and handcuff gags. Then Billionaire Ted talked about how he didn't care that his 2 biggest stars had died because he could just buy more stars, since he can't create them himself. Then a big guy in a black robe came in with FTC on his outfit. Ted turned around and saw him, and he had a heart attack and was left for dead. This segment was awful, and with the exception of the fans in the $300 seats who cheered, it was met by mainly indifference and a large amount of boos. 1. Vader, Leon White, and Owen Hart and Davey Boy Smith, David Smith, beat Jake Roberts, Aurelian Smith Jr., and Ahmed Johnson, Tony Norris and Yokozuna, Rodney Anoya, in 12:51 when Vader pinned Roberts with a Vader bomb. Roberts gave Hart a DDT with the ref distracted. Jim Cornette then came in with his tennis racket, but Roberts beat him to the punch and set him up for the DDT. Vader ran in and destroyed Roberts from behind, leading to the pin. As expected, the heels had to carry this thing. Roberts isn't nearly as over as he was when he first came in, and works smart. Nobody has ever accused him of being a dumb worker, but is very limited physically because of age and injuries. Johnson is still really green, but it was impressive to see a guy his size do a tope. Yokozuna looked good considering his weight limitations. There were pops for the signature points of the match and for Vader Yokozuna, but not sustained heat. 2.5 stars. 2. The first half of the Roddy Piper, Roderick Toombs and Goldust, Dustin Runnels, match took place in a Hollywood backlot tape the day before. After editing, the footage aired in a 4:23 segment. It was basically a collection of movie fighting scenes and was about as good as would have been possible. Goldust came in driving a gold caddy, and Piper sprayed it with a water hose and bashed out the windows with a baseball bat. Piper got a few bat shots in, smashed Goldust into a food table and hard into a garbage bin and threw several garbage cans on him. He sprayed Goldust with a hose, slammed him on the car hood and gave him a fist drop on the hood. Piper's punches were so stiff he appeared to open up his hand, and Goldust was opened hard way in probably 3 different spots. Finally, Goldust used a low blow and rammed Piper into a garbage bin and got in his car and drove off. Piper got in front of the car and Goldust basically ran into him and Piper held onto the hood. The way the scene was shot and replayed, it appeared that running over segment was actually done by a stuntman dressed to look like Piper. Piper then got into a white Ford Bronco to pick up the chase. Even though this was on tape and shown on TV monitors and the big screen to the fans live, this segment got more reaction than anything on the show except for Ultimate Warrior. 3. Steve Austin, Steve Williams, pin Savio Vega, Juan Rivera. In 10:08. Finish saw Vega spin kick the ref, who sold it forever. Vega kicked Austin in the face for a fall but no ref. Ted DiBiase then got the $1 million belt and gave it to Austin, who hit Vega with it twice, then put on the $1 million dream. The ref still was out, so DiBiase got a Coke from an official and poured it on the ref, who revived and saw Vega out and signaled the finish. Austin got the move on for a long time after the match. Both guys worked hard but there was no heat and the finish died live. The work itself was good in spots and slightly off in other spots. 2 stars. 4. Ultimate Warrior, Jim Hellwig, pinned Hunter Hearst Helmsley Paul Levesque, in 1:38 with 3 clotheslines, a shoulder block and press and a splash. Warrior got by far the biggest reaction on the show when he came out. It was amazing how quiet the crowd got after the ring intro, but since Helmsley did the pedigree right away and Warrior didn't sell it and went right to the finish, the crowd picked up right away. Hellwig was a little smaller than at his peak, but he's also 39 years old, and he was quite a bit larger and more cut than when he returned the last time. Dud. In a segment that didn't air to the live audience, they were doing an interview introducing Wildman Mark Marrow, who did a heel interview until Helmsley came out and the two started arguing and fighting. Helmsley then blamed the fight on the woman who they called Sable that accompanied him to the ring. People have told me they are 99% sure Sable is Marrow's wife and it's obvious she's going to wind up managing him. Based on everything that went down before, I'd have to believe that's the case. Lots of WCW folks found it humorous that WWF knocks WCW for not being original and then they take Johnny B. Bad and put him in a total copy of the angle he was already in. 5. Undertaker Mark Calloway pinned Diesel Kevin Nash in 1646 with a tombstone. The match was slow moving and didn't have much heat, but it was better than you'd expect considering who was involved. Diesel basically pounded Undertaker for most of the match. Finally he used his jackknife, but then smirked forever, allowing Undertaker to sit up. He did it again, and then when he went for the pin, Undertaker grabbed him by the throat. Diesel used a back suplex and Undertaker sat up again. Undertaker then finished Diesel off with a nice flying clothesline, choke slam, and the tombstone. 2 1/4 stars. 6. During the show, they continually showed scenes of the OJ chase trying to put over that it was Piper's white Ford Bronco chasing Goldust. Piper did a couple of cell phone interviews during the Austin match, which the people live didn't know about, so it can't be blamed for that match getting no heat. When Goldust arrived at the building to pick up Marlena, he bumped into Pat Patterson, who was either back there just for the weekend or back involved in booking depending upon who you talk with. Piper then showed up and chased Goldust into the ring and started pounding on him. Goldust made the comeback with another low blow and rammed Piper's leg into the post. The announcers failed to make the connection that was the leg injured by the car running into him. Goldust got on top of Piper, basically attempting to screw him and wanting to start kissing him. He went to the top rope, but Piper shook the rope and Goldust crotched himself. Goldust came back with headbutts and kissed Piper, which led to Piper making the Superman comeback. Piper grabbed Goldust's crotch and started squeezing, threw a knee to the groin and started spanking him, then ripped his costume off and Goldust was wearing women's black undies. After another knee to the groin, Marlena managed to cover Goldust up and he ran off, leaving Piper celebrating with his son Colton in the ring. This segment went 5:37. For what it was really good and also had great heat. 7. Shawn Michaels, Michael Hickenbottom, captured the WWF title from Bret Hart in 1:52 of sudden death overtime after the two had battled 60 minutes with no falls taken. Michaels came out from the ceiling of the building. Hart didn't get as big a pop coming out as Michaels, but he didn't do an elaborate entrance, and he received no boos coming out. largely because there were almost no Hispanics in the crowd. The first half of the match was slow-paced with little crowd noise. It wasn't as if the crowd was intensely watching because people were steadily leaving for the concession stands. But the execution on both sides was tremendous in what they were doing. The first big pop came when Michaels accidentally superkicked the timekeeper outside the ring when Hart moved, and he did a stretcher job. This is the type of match where announcing plays a big part. And Vince McMahon was good, but Jerry Lawler was the wrong color commentator for this match, especially since after playing the Bret Hart hater role for the past 3 years, he suddenly dropped his hatred for Hart during this match except for a few one-liners about Stu and Helen. Michaels began working on Hart's shoulder and the crowd started a "Let's go Bret," but it was light and never really got going. Michaels was using some Japanese wrestling submission moves like cross arm breakers, but the announcers didn't sell them seriously on TV, and live the crowd just saw them as wrist holds. After a hot shot, Michaels was monkey flipped into the ring post for a near fall at the 28:15 mark. Hart got a few more near falls and there was a ref bump, although the ref got out to count the near fall when Michaels power slammed Hart. After Michaels kicked out of a pile driver, it was the first booing for the near falls and it continued for most of the near falls for the remainder of the match. It appeared in the upper part of the building at this point that the people were booing most everything. Michaels hit an awesome Santa dive at the 33-minute mark, then hit a crossbody with Hart rolling through for a near fall. The match picked up from that point with Michaels hitting a fisherman suplex, perfect plex, for a near fall. The crowd booed when they used a sleeper. Michaels took a great bump over the top rope at 36:50 and Hart rammed his back into the post. Michaels then took a Ray Stevens bump into the corner and Hart took him off the ropes with a backwards superplex for a near fall in 41:15. Michaels took a bump over the top and crashed into Jose Lothario at 44 minutes. Hart then whipped Michaels into Lothario, but Lothario didn't really sell, it was an injury. After several more near falls, Hart hit a tope and then used a German suplex for a near fall at 48:35 and then went back into a camel clutch. At this point the number of fans leaving the building picked up. Hart used a superplex while standing on the top rope for a near all, went for the sharpshooter but Michaels blocked it. Hart used a half crab and Michaels got a rope break and the fans booed. Hart came off the top but Michaels got his feet up. Hart took his chest bump into the buckles hard leading to a near fall with a double sledge off the top at 57:05. Michaels did the Randy Savage elbow for a near fall in 57:40, a Dr. Bomb for a near fall and a moonsault block for a near fall in 58:20. Michaels tried a flying Hurricane Rana off the middle ropes but it was messed up. He went for a drop kick off the top but Hart caught his legs and got the sharpshooter on with 34 left and Michaels held out until the end without submitting. Hart left with the belt, but Gorilla Monsoon told the ref to restart the match with a sudden death stipulation, which had never been previously advertised. The pop for that announcement was shockingly tepid. In the overtime, Michaels immediately hit 2 super kicks and got the pin in 1:52 and celebrated in the ring for several minutes afterwards, nearly choking up. In the celebration, Michaels did a Ken Shamrock by kissing Helen Hart and hugging Bret's son Blade. Bret walked out of the ring at the finish rather than doing a symbolic in-ring passing of the torch. 4 1/4 stars. The complete lineup for the multi-promotional World Wrestling Peace Festival put on by Antonio Inoki on June 1st in Los Angeles is expected to be announced this coming week. On paper, the show appears to be the greatest collection of international talent ever assembled on a show with the exception of last year's multi-promotional Tokyo Dome show. However, there exists controversy as to the participation of the World Wrestling Federation. As mentioned in last week's Observer, WWF officials told us that they respectfully declined their invitation to participate in the show and have a major house show booked that evening. However, Asper de Arce, a WWF vice president, has been in communication with WWPF officials and sent a fax saying they would participate provided they retain all television and video rights to their performers, which basically means if the show were to appear on television, pay-per-view or video, that none of the WWF performers would be allowed to be featured in those mediums. Yet another source said that the WWF won't participate because the belief is held that the original main event for the show, Antonio Inoki vs. Vader, won't take place because they believe WCW officials influenced Inoki to pull Vader from the show and that New Japan is showing no interest in booking Vader, believed to be because of the WCW connection, despite Vader's performance with Inoki at the Tokyo Dome. 5 matches were officially released on April 2nd, all involving AAA and EMLL. The lone interpromotional match will be Akira Hokuto and Lola Gonzalez of EMLL versus Paul Nakano and Neftali of AAA. They wanted to do an interpromotional, and I guess the only way to politically pull it off was to make it a women's match. The Mexican women are nowhere close to the level of the Japanese, but Hokuto and Nakano should be able to carry it to at least an acceptable, if not very good match, and apparently will work out a finish involving themselves so no EMLL wrestler has to do a job or AAA wrestler to someone from the other group, as if it would matter in this case. The other matches announced were Dos Caras and Hector Garza vs. Dr. Wagner Jr. and Grand Marcus Jr., Octagon and Ultimo Dragon vs. Psicosis and Heavy Metal, Atlantis and Elio Del Santo vs. Silver King and Negro Casas, and Conan and Pero Aguayo vs. Cibernetico and Pierroth Jr. It would be in everyone's best interest to change the third match to have Rey Mysterio Jr. replace Octagon and Juventud Guerrero replace Heavy and move both of them either off the card or make the Conan match into a trios bout, adding them there, or simply adding Mysterio and Guerrero and making that a trios match. Also appearing on the card will be Sting, Lex Luger, The Giant, Alex Wright, Ric Flair, Rick, and Scott Steiner, Randy Savage, Eddie Guerrero and Chris Benoit from WCW, Inoki, Keiji Muto as Great Muta, Hiroyoshi Tenzan, Masa Chono, Jushin Liger, Koji Kanemoto and Kensuke Sasaki from New Japan, plus Nobuhiko Tada, Benichiro Tenryu, and Great Sasuke. Provided they aren't injured in their May matches, they've talked with Dan Severn and Oleg Toktarov about doing some sort of a submission exhibition. Also under consideration would be a triangle match involving Terry Funk, Sabu, and a third participant. WCW and New Japan will do a few interpromotional matches, and among those under consideration are Luger vs. Chono, Liger vs. Guerrero and Benoit vs. Kanemoto. They are still in negotiation with All Japan about bringing in as many as 10 wrestlers from that company as well. All Japan Women held its biggest arena show of the year on March 31st at the Yokohama Arena, drawing 12,500 fans for a 6-hour-long house show headlined by Manami Toyota retaining her WWA World title, pinning Kyoko Inoue in 21-29 with the Japanese Ocean Cyclone Suplex. The headline matches will be edited down for a 90-minute special that airs on the Fuji Network on April 14th. Don't know the house, but the capacity, which with the setup the women use is about 16,000, is close to $1.5 million in that building at the prices charged, so the house may have approached 7 figures since most of that was paid. We don't have any reports regarding match quality other than the following results. 1. In a 6-woman tag involving prelim girls, Team JWP of Tomoko Miyaguchi and Tomoko Kuzumi and Yuki Miyazaki beating All Japan's trio of Saya Endo, formerly Nobu Endo, debuting her new ring name, Genki Misae, formerly Misae Watanabe, debuting her new ring name, and Yoshiko Tamura in 11:38 when Miyaguchi pinned Misae. 2. In another interpromotional 6-woman tag, the Yoshimoto Pro Wrestling team of Chikako Shiratori and Bloody Phoenix and Flor Metallica of EMLL beat Kumiko Makawa and Yuka Shina and Tiny Mouth, another prelim girl, debuting her new ring name, but I'm not sure which one this was, when Shiratori pinned Shina with a German suplex in 12:56. 3. Tashio Yamada pinned Atsuko Mita in 10:26 with a reverse Goria special bomb. 4. Ri Tamada and Yumi Fukawa of All Japan Women retained their Japanese tag team titles, beating the JWP challenging team of Hiromi Yagi and Kaneko Mototani in 12:05 when Tamada pinned Mototani with a dragon suplex. 5. In a shoot match under shoot boxing rules, shoot boxing is a Japanese sport that combines kickboxing and allows body throws but no mat work. Fumiko Ishimoto, the champion at 121 pounds in that sport, won a unanimous decision over former AJW wrestler Bat Yoshinaga after 3 rounds. I was told that Bat, who when she worked for AJW was their best kickboxer, was out of her league after being retired for 1 year, and Ishimoto's punches had that snap and quickness she couldn't combat. 6. In what was billed as the Fantastic Four match, Reggie Bennett and Chiquita Azteca, Esther Moreno under a mask, beat Chaparita Asari and Mariko Yoshida in 13:57 when Bennett pinned Yoshida after a Chris Benoit-style powerbomb. 7. Saki Hasegawa, 25 years old, had her retirement match, which was scheduled as her and Kaoru Ito against Michiko Nagashima of LLPW and Tomoko Watanabe. These 4 were put together in this match because they all started together in the AJW rookie training camp of 1989, although Nagashima wound up not making it with AJW and joined LLPW. At the beginning, Hasegawa challenged Ito to join the others and do a 1-on-3. They ended up doing it with Hasegawa selling until she made a comeback doing a urinage suplex on all 3. At that point, Ito switched sides back to her. The finish was a shocker as Watanabe pinned Hasegawa in 14:24. Even though they've never been a tag team, it's well known that Watanabe and Hasegawa had been best friends since starting out, and after the pin they both grabbed each other and started hugging and crying. Lots of the people in the crowd were crying, and she was presented with flowers and presents by most of the AJW women in what I was told was a great retirement ceremony. 8. Takako Inoue retained her IWA championship, pinning Mima Shimoda in 13:32. 9. An interpromotional match billed as the Reunion Wonder 6-woman tag saw Asia Kong and Combat Toyota FMW, and Kuga, Miori Kamiya of Yoshimoto Pro Wrestling, beat Megumi Kudo, FMW, and Bison Kimura, Yoshimoto Pro and Kaoru Gia, in 23:02 when Kuga pinned Kimura with a German suplex to put heat on that company's #1 feud. All 6 of these women started out together in the All Japan Women Training Camp class of 1986-10. In what was billed as a Valley Tudo-style rules match, Yumiko Hata defeated Leticia Angel Olusini of Florida in 9:13 with a cross-arm breaker. It was billed as a shoot match, but considering its position on the show and the result, I'd be skeptical. 11. Toyota retained the title pinning Kyoko Inoue. Major events wrestling calendar April 5 to May 5. April 5 Universal Valley Tudo Tokyo Komazawa Park Gym, Kiao vs Otarvio. April 7 JWP Yokohama Bunka Gym, Kansai and Takako Inoue vs Ozaki and Kyoko Inoue. April 7 All Japan Fukuoka Hakata Star Lanes, Kawada vs Kobashi. April 8 All Japan Hiroshima Sun Plaza Arena, Kawada vs Williams. April 10 All Japan Kyoto KBS Hall, Kobashi vs Williams. April 13 Pancrase Pay-Per-View, tape January 28 Yokohama Bunka Gym Suzuki vs Frank Shamrock. April 13 ECW Queens New York Lost Battalion Hall, Gangstas vs Sandman and Scorpio vs Headhunters. April 14 All Japan Sendai Miyagi Sports Center, Misawa vs Kawada. April 15 WCW Monday Nitro tapings Charleston, West Virginia Civic Center, Hogan and Booty vs Anderson and Sullivan. April 19 UWFI New Japan Osaka Furitsu Gym, Takada and Kanehara vs Chashu and Sasaki. April 19 War Sapporo Nakajima Sports Center, Fuyugi and Gedo and Jado vs Chono and Tenzan and H. Saito. April 20 All Japan Tokyo Budokan Hall, Champion Carnival Tournament Finals. April 20 ECW Philadelphia ECW Arena, Raven vs Douglas. April 21 War Tokyo Sumo Hall. April 22 WCW Monday Nitro tapings Albany, Georgia Civic Center. April 26 Extreme Fighting Championships 2 pay-per-view Montreal, Zenovia vs Vite. April 26 Rings Osaka Furitsu Gym, Frey vs Maurice Smith. April 28 WWF In Your House pay-per-view Omaha, Nebraska Civic Center, Michaels vs Diesel. April 29 New Japan Tokyo Dome, Takada vs Hashimoto. April 29 FMW Osaka Meishima Arena. April 29 WWF Monday Night Raw tapings Sioux City, Iowa. April 29 WCW Monday Nitro tapings Palmetto, Florida Manatee Civic Center. April 30 WWF Superstars tapings Des Moines, Iowa. May 5 FMW Kawasaki Baseball Stadium, Tanaka and Hayabusa vs Pogo. And May 5 WCW Monday Nitro tapings Daytona Beach, Florida Ocean Center. Results: March 22 Nezawal Koital AAA 3000 sellout Super Muñequito and Baby Rabbit and Mini Frisbee B Espectritos 1 and 2 and La Parquita, Halcón Dorado Jr. and Blue Demon Jr. and Tinieblas Jr. and Mascara Sagrada Jr. B Los Villanos and Caras La Momia, Cage Match, Heavy Metal and Pierroth Jr. B Mascara Sagrada and Latin Lover. March 22 Dallas Sportatorium Confederate Wrestling Association, Sam Houston B Chris Young, Guido Falcone and Vito Mussolini B Al Jackson and Action Jackson DQ, Johnny Mantel B John Hawk, Justin Bradshaw, Scott Putski B Tugboat Taylor Bull Rope Match, Bobby Duncombe Jr. B Dick Murdoch, CWA Tag Titles, Bo Vegas and Devin Michaels B Sean Summers and Alex Porto. March 22 Bankstown, Australia, Mega Pro Wrestling, Mark Mercedes B Cook Island Prince, Animal Harpers B Blade Runner, Greg Stecker, Pancrase Gregory Smeet, B TNT Kid, John Tolios B Lebanese Butcher DQ TNT Kid 1 Battle Royal. March 23 Morgan City, Louisiana, Deep South Wrestling Federation, 550, Tim Brooks B Casey Cannon, Frogman LeBlanc B Ray Evans, Sam Houston B Tom Jones, Harry Gordieker Dick Murdoch. March 23 Hudson, New Hampshire, Ringside Wrestling, 150, Wolfman B Goon, Chad Thunderstorm B Black Demon, Bruiser Costa B Scott Sharkey, Sonny Goodspeed and Coach French B Dan Petty and Mama, Rip Morrison and Johnny Royal B Bob Evans, and Maverick Wild. March 23 San Bernardino, California, Golden State Wrestling Association, Matt Sinister B Rudy Reyna, Thrash Master B Supreme, Dixie Demon B Jeremiah Cornfed, Role Model B Jason Redondo, Ladies Man, John Hanna B Electric Youth, David Hanna, Kid Chaos B Prime Time Peterson DQ, Thrash Master 1 Battle Royal. March 25 Memphis, USWA, Head Bangers B Tony Williams and David Haskins, Miss Texas B Tasha Simone, Coward waves the flag match, Brandon Baxter b. Scott Bowden, Brian Christopher b. Sir Mo, USWA title, Mabel b. Jesse James Armstrong, USWA tag titles, Cyberpunks, PG-13, b. Tommy Rich and Doug Gilbert to win titles, Stretcher match, Men on Mission b. Jerry Lawler and Christopher. March 25th Iwanuma, Michinoku Pro 360 Grand Naniwa b. Masato Yakashiji Yone Jinjinker Wellington Wilkins Jr., Taka Michinoku and Shoichi Funaki b. Pantera and Tiger Mask, Super Delphin b. Arrow Flash, Shiryu and Men's Tao and Dick Togo b. Naohiro Hoshikawa and Grand Hamada and Great Sasuke. March 25th Hachinahe All Japan Women, 1920, Nobu Endo b. Ko Nomi, Yukashina b. Marimogami Kaoru Ito and Yoshiko Tamura and Mina Tanayama b. Shaparita Asari and Yumi Fukawa and Misae Watanabe, Kyoko Inoue and Takako Inoue and Tomoko Watanabe b. Mariko Yoshida and Saki Hasegawa and Reggie Bennett, Manami Toyota b. Kumiko Makawa, Yumiko Hara and Etsuko Mita b. Asia Kong and Toshio Yamada. March 25th Hakata, Jia, Sanoka Kato b. Meiko Satomura, Tomoko Kuzumi and Borishoi Kid b. Meiki Numao and Nakano, Toshie Uematsu d. Chikeo Nagashima, Toshie Sato and Kaoru b. Devil Masami and Kanako Mototani, Chigusa Nagio and Bomber Hikari and Kato b. Eagle Sawai and Michiko Nagashima and Yukari Gen. March 25th Odate, Tokyo Pro Wrestling, Eddie Jackie b. Masked Pro No. 1, Tenakabo Ike b. Masanobu Kurisu, Shigeo Okamura b. Howard Bloody Bruise A and B. Astro Jr. and Shocker, Kishin Kawabata and Masashi Aoyagi b. Mr. Pogo and Toryu, Takashi Ishikawa and Gecko and Garuda b. Akihiko Masuda and Great Kabuki and Daiko Kubo Benkei. March 25th Takaoka, Big Japan Pro Wrestling, Shun Matsuda b. Masahiko Kochi, Ichiro Yaguchi b. Yosuke Kobayashi, Takeshi Ono b. Satoshi Yoniyama, Satoru Shiga and Unicorn b. Aquarius and Crusher Takahashi, Jason Knight and Dances with Dudley b. Yoshiaki Yatsu and Ichiro Yaguchi, Sabu b. Seiji Yamakawa, Barbed Wire Street Fight, Mr. Pogo and Shoji Nakamaki b. Kendo Nagasaki and Bruiser Okamoto. March 26th Kitakyushu, Big Japan Pro Wrestling, Masahiko Kochi b. Yosuke Kobayashi, Satoru Shiga b. Shun Matsuzaki, Takeshi Ono b. Satoshi Yoniyama, Aquarius and Crusher Takahashi b. Unicorn and Ichiro Yaguchi, Yoshiaki Yatsu b. Bruiser Okamoto, Sabu b. Dances with Dudley, Street Fight, Jason Knight and Bull Payne and Shoji Nakamaki b. Kendo Nagasaki and Seiji Yamakawa and Yuichi Taniguchi. March 26 Takaoka, WAR, Damien b. Battle Ranger, Masayoshi Motegi b. Takeshi Okamura, Big Titan and Dr. Luther b. Osamu Teitoko and Arashi, Lionheart b. Lance Storm, Geto b. Yujiyasu Ryoka, Jado b. Ultimo Dragon, Hiromichi Fuyuki b. Koki Kitahara. March 26 Ganahe, Michinoku Pro, Wellington Wilkins Jr. and Pantera b. Masato Yakashiji and Arrow Flash, Tiger Mask b. Naohiro Hoshikawa, Dick Togo and Men Sato and Shiryu b. Yone Jinjin and Grand Naniwa and Super Delphin Great Sasuke and Grand Hamada b. Taka Michinoku and Shoichi Funaki. March 26 Morioka All Japan Women, 1750 Yuka Shinobi Ko Nomi, Yoshiko Tamura b. Marimogami, Saki Hasegawa and Yumi Fukawa and Nobu Endo b. Toshio Yamada and Misae Watanabe and Mina Tanayama, Kyoko Inoue and Takako Inoue and Kumiko Makawa b. Reggie Bennett and Kaoru Ito and Shaparita Asari, Yumiko Hara b. Etsuko Mita, Asia Kong and Tomoko Watanabe b. Manami Toyota and Mariko Yoshida. March 26 Okazaki FMW Megumi Kudo b. Kaori Nakayama, Nenjo Hayato b. Yoshi Kwan, Hisakatsu Oya and Riki Fuji b. Koji Nakagawa and Katsutoshi Niyama, Shark Tsuchiya and Miwa Sato b. Aki Kanbayashi and Combat Toyota, Headhunters b. Jason the Terrible and Hideki Hasaka. No Rope Barbed Wire Street Fight Tornado Death Match, Super Leather and Wing Kanemura and Hido b. Horace Boulder and Masato Tanaka and Megumi Kudo. March 27 Rome, Georgia WCW Saturday Night Tapings 3,400 sellout / 3,200 paid, Lex Luger b. The Giant DQ Arnold Anderson b. Steve Armstrong, Jim Duggan b. David Taylor, Bootyman b. Max Muscle, Eddie Guerrero b. Devon Storm, Harlem Heat b. State Patrol WCW TV title, Luger b. Shark Conan b. Pat Tanaka, Belfast Bruiser b. Bobby Eaton, Giant b. Bubba Rogers, American Males b. Meng and Barbarian, Sting b. Hugh Morris, WCW title, Ric Flair b. Dick Slater, Conan b. Storm. March 27, Nagoya, WAR, Masaaki Mochizuki b Masayoshi Motegi, Osamu Tashi Akari b Takashi Okamura, Ultimo Dragon b Damien, Arashi and Koki Kitahara b Dr. Luther and Big Titan, int. Junior Tag Titles, Lance Storm and Yuji Yasu Ryoka b Geto and Lion due to win titles 2409, Jado and Hiramichi Fuyuki b Genichiro Tenryu and Nobutaka Araya. March 27, Matsuzaka, FMW, Combat Toyota b Aki Kanbayashi, Riki Fuji and Yoshi Kwan b Katsutoshi Niyama and Nanjio Hayato, Isakatsu Oya b Tetsuhiro Kuroda, Shark Tsuchiya and Miwa Sato b Megumi Kudo and Kaori Nakayama, Headhunters b Haido and Super Leather, Street Fight, Horace Boulder and Koji Nakagawa and Masato Tanaka b Jason the Terrible and Hideki Hasaka and Wing Kanemura. March 27, Sako, Michinoku Pro 306, Wellington Wilkins Jr. NC Yone Jinjin, Super Delphin and Grand Naniwa b Pantera and Masato Yakashiji Grand Hamada and Naohiro Hoshikawa b Shoichi Funaki and Takamichinoku, Men's Tao and Dick Togo and Shiryu b Great Sasuke and Arrow Flash and Tiger Mask. March 27, Ichiniseki Tokyo Pro Wrestling, Bloody Bruise A and BB Garuda and Masked Pro No. 1, Mark Starr and Jerry Flynn b Eddie Jackie and Howard Masashi Aoyagi b Kishin Kawabata, Astro Jr. and Shocker b Gecko and Akihiko Masuda, Mr. Pogo b Masanobu Kurisu, Yoshiaki Fujiwara and Shigeo Okamura and Takashi Ishikawa b Tenakabo Ike and Daiko Kubo Benkei and Great Kabuki. March 27, Okayama, Big Japan Pro Wrestling, Masahiko Kochi b Satoru Shiga, Ichiro Yaguchi b Yosuke Kobayashi, Takeshi Ono b Satoshi Yoniyama, Shun Matsuzaki and Unicorn b Aquarius and Crusher Takahashi, Yoshiaki Yatsubi Yuichi Taniguchi, Sabu b Bull Pain DQ, No Rope Street Fight, Jason Knight and Dances with Dudley and Shoji Nakamaki b Seiji Yamakawa and Kendo Nagasaki and Bruiser Okamoto. March 27, Matsushima All Japan Women, Yukashina b Mari Mogami, Misae Watanabe b Yumi Fukawa, Mariko Yoshida and Kumiko Maekawa b Kaoru Ito and Mina Taniyama, Yumiko Hata and Tashio Yamada and Tomoko Watanabe b Kyoko Inoue and Takako Inoue and Yoshiko Tamura, Atsuko Mita b Saki Hasegawa, Manami Toyota and Reggie Bennett b Asia Kong and Shaparita Asari. March 27, Kumamoto, LLPW, Mishko Omukai and Mizuki Endo b Mikiko Futagami and Yasha Kuranai, Eagle Sawai and Yukari Gen b Kurula and Shinobu Kandori DQ Omukai and Endo b Gen and Sawai, Rumi Kazama b Norio Tadano. March 28, Isazaki, All Japan, 2300, Ryukaku Izamida b Manukia Mossman, Tsuyoshi Kikuchi b Satoru Asako, Giant Baba and Rusher Kimura and Mitsuo Momoto b Mighty Inoue and Haruka Eigen and Masafuchi Gary Albright b Takawamori, Kena Kobashi b Tamon Honda, Stan Hansen b Jun Akiyama, Dan Crawford and Doug Furness b Kantaro Shiga and Mitsuharu Misawa, Steve Williams and Johnny Ace and the Patriot b Toshiaki Kawada and Akira Tao and Yoshinari Ogawa. March 28, Iwade FMW Jason the Terrible b Nanjo Hayato Megumi Kudo b Miwa Sato Koji Nakagawa b Yoshi Kwan, Hisakatsu Oya b Hideki Hasaka, Crusher Maidamari and Shark Tsuchiya b Aki Kanbayashi and Combat Toyota, Headhunters b Riki Fuji and Horace Boulder, No Ropes Barbed Wire Street Fight Tornado Death Match, Wing Kanemura and Haido and Super Leather b Tetsuhiro Kuroda and Katsutoshi Niyama and Masato Tanaka. March 28, Yokkaichi, WAR, Masayoshi Motegi b Battle Ranger, Yuji Yasuryoka b Takashi Okamura, Lance Storm b Damien, Big Titan and Dr. Luther b Arashi and Osamu Teitoko, Lion Do and Geto b Ultimo Dragon and Masaaki Mochizuki, Nobutaka Araya, and Koki Kitahara b Jado and Hiramichi Fuyuki. March 28, Niitsu, Michinoku Pro, 1540, Grand Naniwa b Masato Yakashiji, Yone Jinjin NC Wellington Wilkins Jr., Taka Michinoku and Shoichi Funaki b Tiger Mask and Naohiro Hoshikawa, Super Delphin b Arrow Flash, Great Sasuke and Grand Hamada and Pantera b Dick Togo and Men's Tao and Shiryu. March 28, Tagajo, Tokyo Pro Wrestling, Kishin Kawabata b Akihiko Masuda, Bruiser Okamoto b Masked Pro No. 1, Jerry Flynn and Mark Starr b Bloody Bruise A and B, Masashi Aoyagi b Masanobu Kurisu, Daiko Kubo Benkei and Tenakabo Ike b Mr. Pogo and Toryu, Takashi Ishikawa and Gecko and Garuda b Astro Jr. and Shocker and Great Kabuki. March 28, Kanazawa, Big Japan Pro Wrestling, Shun Matsuzaki b Yosuke Kobayashi, Ichiro Yaguchi b Satoru Shiga, Takeshi Ono be Satoshi Yoniyama, Aquarius and Crusher Takahashi be Unicorn and Masahiko Kochi, Yoshiaki Yatsu be Bruiser Okamoto, Sabu be Dances with Dudley, Barbed Wire Street Fight Deathmatch Shoji Nakamaki and Jason Knight and Bull Pain be Kendo Nagasaki and Seiji Yamakawa and Yuichi Taniguchi. March 28 Fukuoka, LLPW Rumikazama be Mizuki Endo, Eagle Sawai and Michiko Nagashima be Yasha Kurenai and Mikiko Futagami, Karula and Norio Tadano be Shinobu Kandori and Michiko Omukai. March 28 Bakersfield, California, Slammers, Buddy West be Jesus Zapata, Bruce Bodine be Vern Langdon DQ, Hombre de Oro be Tyrone Little, Movie star Mike DDQ Samoan Kid, Jeff Lindbergh be El Toro Bravo. March 29 Nagaoka, All Japan, 2900 Tsuyoshi Kikuchi be Masao Inoue, Takao Omori be Satoru Asako, Yoshinari Ogawa and Masa Fuchi and Akira Tao be Manukia Mossman and Kentaro Shiga and Giant Baba, Johnny Ace be Tamon Honda, Steve Williams be The Patriot, Gary Albright be Toshiaki Kawada, Mitsuharu Misawa and Kena Kobashi and Jun Akiyama be Stan Hansen and Dan Crawford and Doug Furness. March 29 Tijuana, Norte, California, AAA 2050, Los Chacales 1 and 2 and 3 be X-Men 1 and 2 and 3, Pandilleros 1 and 2 and 3 be Negro Azteca and Genghis Khan and Depredator, Psicosis and Juventud Guerrera and Halloween be Rey Mysterio Jr. and Leon Negro and Super Colo. Conan and La Parca at Octagon be Pierre Roth Jr. and Cybernetico and Heavy Metal, Psicosis and Guerrera and Halloween be Chacales, Mysterio Jr. and Colo and Negro D X-Men, Depredator and Khan and Azteca be Pierre Roth Jr. and Cybernetico and Metal, Pandilleros be Conan and Parca and Octagon. Lumberjack match, Conan and Parca and Octagon be Psicosis and Guerrera and Halloween. March 29 Omijiman WAR, Takashi Okamura be Masayoshi Motegi, Yuji Yasu Ryoka be Masaaki Mochizuki, Janobu Osamu Te Toko, Lance Storm be Lionheart, Nobutaka Araya, and Arashi and Koki Kitahara be Damien, and Dr. Luther and Big Titan, Genichiro Tenryu and Ultimo Dragon be Hiromichi Fuyuki and Geto. March 29 Tajimi FMW Riki Fuji be Nanjio Hayato, Combat Toyota be Miwa Sato, Koji Nakagawa and Katsutoshi Niyama be Hisakatsu Oya and Yoshi Kwan, Crusher Maidamari and Shark Tsuchiya be Aki Kanbayashi and Megumi Kudo, Headhunters be Haido and Jason the Terrible, No Rope Barbed Wire Street Fight Tornado Death Match, Hideki Hasaka and Wing Kanemura and Super Leather be Fuji and Masato Tanaka and Horace Boulder. March 29 Gunma All Japan Women, 1420 Misae Watanabe be Yukashina, Mina Tanayama and Kumiko Makawa and Mima Shimoda be Yoshiko Tamura and Yumi Fukawa and Kaoru Ito, Reggie Bennett and Takako Inoue and Kyoko Inoue be Shaparita Asari and Atsuko Mita and Toshio Yamada. Asia Kong be Saki Hasegawa, Tomoko Watanabe and Yumiko Hata be Manami Toyota and Mariko Yoshida. March 29 Mexico City Arena, Mexico, EMLL, Guerrero Maya and Alcon Negro and Guerrero del Futuro be Kato Kung Lee Sr. and Olympico and Olympus, Solar and Mascara Magica and La Fiera be Black Panther and Archangel and Fuerza Guerrera DQ, Los Brazos be Rambo and Cajos and Blue Panther DQ. Felino and El Satanico and Dr. Wagner Jr. be El Hijo del Santo and Atlantis and Dos Caras. March 29 Yonago, Big Japan Pro Wrestling, Shun Matsuzaki be Yosuke Kobayashi, Keshi Ono be Satoshi Yoniyama, Unicorn and Bruiser Okamoto be Crusher Takahashi and Ichiro Yaguchi, Jason Knight be Seiji Yamakawa, Sabu be Masahiko Kochi, Yoshiaki Yatsu be Bullpain DQ, Tax Deathmatch, Dances with Dudley and Shoji Nakamaki be Yuichi Taniguchi and Kendo Nagasaki. March 29 Kamineyama, Michinoku Pro 335, Taka Michinoku be Masato Yakashiji, Yone Jinjin NC Wellington Wilkins Jr., Shoichi Funaki and Super Delphin and Grand Naniwa be Arrow Flash and Pantera and Grand Hamada, Shiryu and Men's Tao and Dick Togo be Nao Hiro Hoshikawa and Tiger Mask and Great Sasuke. March 29 Dallas Sportatorium, Confederate Wrestling Alliance, Al Jackson b. Golden Chicano, Action Jackson d. Bill Irwin, Charlie Norris b. Bullman Downs, Chris Adams b. Sean Summers, Pat Putski b. Firebreaker Chip, Johnny Mantell and Sam Houston and Bobby Duncombe Jr. b. Rod Price and Guido Falcone and Vito Mussolini. March 29 Reading, Pennsylvania, Pennsylvania Championship Wrestling, Don Montoya b. Johnny Graham, Chef DZ Gillespie b. Diablos Macabre, Boogie Woogie Brown b. Masked Assassin, Double Deluxe 1 4 corners match to win PCW tag titles, Juggernaut 1 Battle Royal, Sheeta Master b. Ace Darling, Akita Chaos and Dave Keller b. Reckless Youth and Brown, Primo Carnera Trace b. Mark Mest. March 29, Johannesburg, South Africa, All-Star Wrestling, Doink the Clown be Italian Street Fighter, Dusty Wolf be Black Bullet, Gypsy Roulette be Prince of Africa Core, Danny Vogues be Viking DQ, Vladimir Koloff and Giant Warrior, Butch Masters, Bigama Singh and Danny Brits 1 Battle Royal. March 29, Rome, Georgia, North Georgia Wrestling Alliance, Lee Thomas be Tommy Taylor, Mike Golden and Thomas and Jason Valentine DDQ Ken and John Arden and Max Steele, Ken and John Arden be Steve Lawler and Bubba Humphries, Scott Prather be Golden. March 29, Pembroke, New Hampshire, Ringside Wrestling, 387, Slammy the Clown be Wolfman, Scott Sharkey be El Loco, Dave Gray Fox be Robbie Ellis, Thunderstorm be Bruiser Costa, Sonny Goodspeed be Dan Petty, Rip Morrison and Johnny Royal be Maverick Wild and Bob Evans. March 29, Rossville, Georgia, TWA, Jimmy Sharp be Tracy Black, Frankie Lee be Outpatient, Rick Justice and Johnny Blaze be Mr. Payne and New One Man Gang, Risk Taylor NC Chuck Colt, Doug Watkins and Randy Watkins and Terry Watkins be Roger Sartain and Joel Travis and Mad Jack. March 29, Fall Branch, Tennessee, Southern States Wrestling, Bubba be Danny Christian, Frank Parker be Justin St. John, Bobby Blaze be Bo James, Steve Flynn be Major De Beers, Clever Gimmick, wonder if he thought of it himself? Eddie Bruiser and Iron Man be Equalizer and Sheik White, Scott Sterling and Alan Wayne and Bad Boy Buck be Alan King and Bo James and Cherokee Renegade. March 29, Chicago, Pro Wrestling International 400 the Professor be Johnny Utah, Firefighter Jim be Johnny Mercedes, Whiplash and Flash and Sudden Death be Sonny Rogers and Rick Knight and Adrian Lynch, T-Rex be Billy Wild, Eric Love and Wave Rider Craig be Danny Dominion and Black Iron, Trevor Blanchard be Ronnie Vegas DQ, Sudden Death 1 Battle Royal. March 29, West Allis, Wisconsin, Mid-American Wrestling, 317, Love Brothers be Big Daddy Dave and Barfly Mike, Frankie DeFalco and Johnny Mercedes be Mahler and Axel Future DQ, Wave Rider Craig and Billy Joe Eaton be Danny Dominion and Billy Wild, Spymaster and Trevor Blanchard be Farmer Vic and Bouncer Bulinski, Original Huckster NC Nacho Randy, Craig and Eaton her Spymaster and Blanchard DeFalco and Mercedes be Love Brothers. March 29, Havertown, Pennsylvania, Liberty All-Star Wrestling, HW Star and Derek Domino and John Rock be Otter and Cool Kid Ice and Don E. Allen, Larry Winters be Maverick, Chubby Dudley be Harley Lewis, Jimmy Janetti and Rich Myers be Hell Riders, from the Barfly be Cujo, Abdul Jihad and Lance Diamond and Midnight Morrison and Black Demon be Steve Corino and Johnny Gunn and Inferno Kid and Tony Stallone, Rockin' Rebel be Diamond, Glenn Osborne be Blue Thunder, Rebel be Osborne. March 30, Philadelphia ECW Arena, ECW 1000, Pitbulls be Bad Crew 1 star, Mikey Whipwreck be Damian Kane 1 1/2 star, Gangstas be Chad Austin and Blue Meanie 2 stars, Stretcher Match, JT Smith be Hack Myers 1 1/2 star, Taz be Bubba Ray Dudley 1 star, ECW Tag Titles, Eliminators be Billy Black and the Punisher, SMW 3 stars, ECW TV Title, Too Cold Scorpio be Rob Van Dam 30 minutes 3 1/2 stars, Joel Hart Good be Broad Street Bully, Tony Stetson, Dodge Shane Douglas and Tommy Dreamer and Sandman be Raven and Bruise Brothers 3 stars. March 30, Columbus, Ohio, WCW 3300, Alex Wright be Dick Slater 1 star, Harlem Heat be American Males 1 1/2 star, Road Warriors be Arnold Anderson and Kevin Sullivan Dud, Moody Man be Disco Inferno 1/2 of 1 star, Giant be Renegade Dud, WCW title, Randy Savage be Ric Flair DQ 3 stars. March 30, Fukui, All Japan 2500 Mighty Inoue be Masao Inoue, Doug Furnace be Tsuyoshi Kikuchi, Takao Mori be Tamon Honda, Giant Baba and Rusher Kimura and Mitsuo Momota be Ryukaku Izumida and Haruka Eigen and Masa Fuchi, Steve Williams and Dan Crawford be Monakia Mossman and Stan Hansen, Johnny Ace D. Gary Albright 30 minutes, Kenta Kobashi be The Patriot, Toshiaki Kawada and Akira Tao and Yoshinari Ogawa be Mitsuharu Misawa and Jun Akiyama and Satoru Asako. March 30, Tokyo Korakuen Hall, FMW, 2150 sellout, Aki Kanbayashi and Kaori Nakayama and Megumi Kudo be Miwa Sato and Crusher Matamari and Shark Tsuchiya, Horace Boulder and Yoshi Kwan be Nanjo Hayato and Katsutoshi Niyama, Hisakatsu Oya be Riki Fuji, Combat Toyota be Bison Kimura Street Fight, Hideki Hasaka and Haido and Wing Kanemura be Tetsuhiro Kuroda and Koji Nakagawa and Masato Tanaka, World Brass Knucks Tag Titles, Headhunters be Jason the Terrible and Super Leather to win titles 2044. March 30, Gifu, WAR, Battle Ranger B. Takashi Okamura, Ultimo Dragon B. Masaaki Mochizuki, Lance Storm and Yuji Yasu Ryoka B. Masayoshi Motegi and Lionheart, Koki Kitahara B. Osamu Tashi Akari, Arashi B. Nobutaka Araya, or 6-man titles, Geto and Jado and Hiromichi Fuyuki B. Big Titan and Dr. Luther and Damien. March 30th Akita, Michinoku Pro, 522, Grand Naniwa B. Masato Yakashiji, Wellington Wilkins Jr. Kuryone Jinjin, Takamichinoku and Super Delphin B. Arrow Flash and Pantera, Shiryu and Men's Tao and Dick Togo B. Naohiro Hoshikawa and Tiger Mask and Great Sasuke, WWE Junior LT. HWT title, Grand Hamada B. Shoichi Funaki. March 30th Shizuoka, Big Japan Pro Wrestling, Shun Matsuzaki B. Satoru Shiga, Takeshi Ono B. Satoshi Yoneyama, Ichiro Yaguchi and Unicorn B. Crusher Takahashi and Masanobu Kochi, Jason Knight B. Yuichi Taniguchi, Yoshiaki Yatsu B. Bruiser Okamoto, Sabu B. Dances with Dudley, No Rope Barbed Wire Street Fight Deathmatch, Bullpain and Shoji Nakamaki B. Seiji Yamakawa and Kendo Nagasaki. March 30th Williamsport, Pennsylvania, International Pro Wrestling, Johnny Graham B. Ricky Blues, Adolfo Ruiz B. Half Nelson and Tiny the Terrible, Johnny Gunker Virgil Skullface B. 911 DQ Doug Flex B. Skullface, Rick Bronski B. Frank Stiletto, 911 NC Bam Bam Bigelow, Street Fight, Public Enemy B. Romeo Valentino and Dino Casanova. March 30th Yardville, New Jersey, NWA, Cousin Luke B. HD Rider DQ, Rick Ratchet and Donnie B. V. Twiggy Ramirez and Madonna Wayne Gacy, Frankie Burns B. Little Akeem, Bad Attitude B. Greek Attitude, Adrian Hall B. Mr. Puerto Rico, NWA title, Dan Severn B. Ghetto Blaster, North American title, Tommy Cairo DDQ Devon Storm, Reckless Youth and D. Low Brown B. Ace Darling and Inferno Kid. March 30th Blackstone, Massachusetts, IWF, 150, Smooth Operator B. Outpatient, Jamie West B. Violet Flame Core, Bulldozer B. Freight Train Dan, Arctic Angel B. Kid Delicious, Richard Byrne B. Antoine Roy DQ, Doink the Clown, Tim McNeely B. Mike Hollow. March 30th Salisbury Beach, Massachusetts, Century Wrestling Alliance, Pink Assassin B. Johnny Angel, Tony Rumble NC Dungeon Master, Falcon and Amigo B. Dick and Mike Lano DQ, Big City Mike B. Skull, Knuckles Nelson B. Angel, Lano Brothers and Pink Assassin B. Falcon and Omega and El Mascarado, Paul Zine B. Skull, Vic Steamboat B. Knuckles Nelson to win TV title. March 30th Durban, South Africa, All-Star Wrestling, Henry Nadu B. Andre Van de Merwe, Black Bullet B. Pink Panther DQ, Prince of Africa B. Dirty Angel, Dusty Wolf B. Viking Gama Singh and Danny Brits B. Giant Warrior, and Vladimir Koloff. March 30th Chattanooga, Tennessee, ABWF, 136, Mike Mercedes B. Dragon Master, CM Quick B. Lemmer Boy, Black Terminator B. Stan Westmoreland, Billy Montana and Ken Arden B. Larry Santo and Mercedes, Richie Dye B. Iron Sheik Original. March 30th Fairview, North Carolina, Great American Wrestling Federation, 100 Executioner B. Bamono Joe, Mike Murphy B. Stan Brown, Dave Jericho and Rick Savage B. Eddie Golden and Stan Lee DQ, Carolina Heartbreaker and Terminator Rex B. J.D. Sullivan and John Owens, Peggy Lee Leather B. Bambi, KC Thunder NC Freight Train Lane. March 30th Abel, South Carolina, Southern Championship Wrestling, 143, Johnny Dollar B. Max Miles, Stone Cold Kid, Derek Green, B. SWAT, Steve Carlton, Wonderful Wayne B. Freedom Fighter DQ, Desperado and Jake Mulligan B. JW and SW Steel, Butcher Blackwell and Cruiser Lewis B. Mickey Free and Ricky Regal DQ. March 30th Spring City, Tennessee, ASW, Tracy Black B. Dragon Master, Frankie Lee B. Outpatient, Jimmy Sharp B. Texas Destroyer, New One Man Gang B. Woody Woodchuck, Rick Justice and Chuck Colt B. Risk Taylor and Joel Travis. March 30th Bremen, Georgia, Georgia International Wrestling Alliance, Kenny D's D. Henchman, Bad News Kid Bucky Siegler B. Ricky Rhodes, Mr. Olympia B. Alan Langford, Billy Knight B. Bola Do DQ, Brad and Scott and Steve Armstrong B. Mark Ash and Cody Gunn and Rob McBride, Ken Timms B. Pretty Boy Floyd. March 30th Indianapolis, Pro Wrestling International, Quicksilver B. Top Rope Troy, Johnny Walker B. El Diablo, T-Rex B. Devil Slayer, Sergeant Nelson B. Trash Luzigan DQ, Dallas James B. Apollo, Autobahn B. Trash Luzigan, T-Rex B. Havoc, Lightning Rod B. Quicksilver DQ, Jimmy Jack Hammer, and Austin James B. Walker and Diamond Dan. March 31st Nagoya Aichi Gym, All Japan, 6500, Masao Inoue and Tsuyoshi Kikuchi b Ryu Kaku Izumida and Satoru Asako, Rusher Kimura and Mitsuo Momota b Haruka Eigen and Mighty Inoue, Yoshinari Ogawa and Takao Mori and Masafuchi b Giant Baba and Jumbo Tsuruta and Kentaro Shiga, Johnny Ace and the Patriot and Manukia Mossman b Stan Hansen and Dan Crawford and Doug Furness, Steve Williams b Tamon Honda, Ari Albright b Jun Akiyama, Toshiaki Kawada d Akira Tao 30 minutes, Mitsuharu Misawa b Kena Kobashi 24:07. March 31, Dayton, Ohio, WCW 4700, Alex Wright b Disco Inferno 3 stars, American Males b Arnold Anderson and Kevin Sullivan 1 3/4 stars, WCW TV title, Booty Man b Lex Luger DQ 1 star, Sting b Dick Slater 1 1/2 star, Giant b Renegade Dud WCW title, Randy Savage b Ric Flair DQ 4 stars, Road Warriors b Harlem Heat 1 1/2 star. March 31, Tokyo Korakuen Hall, War, 2100 sellout, Damien b Takashi Okamura, Lance Storm b Masaaki Mochizuki, Arashi and Osamu Tashi Hikari b Dr. Luther and Lionheart, int. Junior HWT. Title Ultimo Dragon b Gedo, Genichiro Tenryu b Koki Kitahara, Hiromichi Fuyuki and Jado and Taito, Big Titan b Yuji Yasuryoka and Nobutaka Araya, and Koji Kiao. March 31, Kobe, Tokyo Pro Wrestling, Great Kabuki and Daiko Kubo Benkei b Mark Starr and Jerry Flynn, Yoshiaki Yatsu and Masahiko Kochi b Bloody Bruise A and B, Riki Fuji and Hisakatsu Oya b Akihiko Masuda and Kishin Kawabata, Yoshiaki Fujiwara and Mr. Pogo b Mitsudaru Tokuda and Kenshiro Yukimura, Ryumago b Akiyama, Gecko and Garuda b Astro Jr. and Shocker, Benkei and Kabuki b Yatsu and Kochi, Kenichi Yamamoto and Yoshihiro Takayama and Yoji Anjo and Takashi Ishikawa b Tenakabo Ike and Shigeo Okamura and Masanobu Kurisu and Masashi Aoyagi, Pogo and Fujiwara b Fuji and Oya. March 31, Miyake Michinoku Pro 360, Shuichi Funaki and Taka Michinoku and Grand Naniwa b Masato Yakashiji and Pantera and Naohiro Hoshikawa, Wellington Wilkins Jr. b Yone Jinkor, Super Delphin b Arrow Flash, Shiryu and Men's Tao and Dick Togo b Tiger Mask and Grand Hamada and Great Sasuke DQ. March 31, Embron, ONT, Pro Ottawa Wrestling U110, Lord Terracane, Jake Steele, b Kid Grunge, Mike Wildside b Kevin Love, Blazer b Psycho Miko, Renee Bastian b Predator DQ, Dangerous Dan and Mysterious Number 2 b Guy Salmal and Grunge. April 1, San Bernardino, California, WWF Monday Night Raw tapings 3000 sellout, Mankind b Bob Holly, Mark Marrow b Isaac Yankem, Bodydonis b Aldo Montoya and Barry Horowitz, Undertaker b Justin Bradshaw, Arm Wrestling, Ahmed Johnson b Davey Boy Smith, Vader b Yokozuna, Johnson and Jake Roberts b Owen Hart and Smith, Hunter Hurst Helmsley b Duke Dries, IC title, Goldust NC Savio Vega, title held up, Marrow b Leif Cassidy, Steve Austin b Bart Gunn, Mankind b Montoya IC title, Goldust b Vega to regain title, Vader b Fatu WWF title, Shawn Michaels b Jerry Lawler IC title, Ultimate Warrior b Goldust Core, Undertaker b Vader. April 1, Osaka Furitsu Gym, All Japan, 4850, Masao Inoue and Satoru Asako b Kentaro Shiga and Mitsuo Momota, Mighty Inoue and Tsuyoshi Kikuchi and Yoshinari Ogawa b Dan Crawford and Doug Furness and Manukia Mossman, Johnny Ace and the Patriot b Takao Mori and Tamon Honda, Giant Baba and Jumbo Tsuruta and Rusher Kimura b Ryukaku Izumida and Haruka Eigen and Masafuchi, Toshiaki Kawada b Jun Akiyama, Steve Williams d Gary Albright 30 minutes, Kena Kobashi b Stan Hansen 22:15, Mitsuharu Misawa b Akira Tao. April 1, Tokyo Korakuen Hall IWA, 1500 Keizo Matsuda b Nagaoka, Kyoko Ichiki b Emi Motokawa, Tsukioka and Tudor the Turtle b Takeshi Sato and Hiroshi Itakura, Leatherface b Katsumi Hirano, Terry Gordy b Tracy Smothers, Deathmatch, Great Kabuki and Daiko Kubo Benkei b Keisuke Yamada and Takashi Okano, Tiger Jeet Singh and Freddy Krueger, Doug Gilbert, b Tarzan Goto and Mr. Ganasuk. Special thanks to Scott Hudson, James Stanios, James Titus, Ken Barrett, Greg John, Sarah Moore, Kevin Trottier, Ken Doucet, Chris Avisa, Kevin McKenzie, Dan Paris, Peggy Watkins, Faye Ferguson, Rich Palladino, Marcus Watkins, Casey Stefan, Alex Merves, Walt Spafford, Rob Vith, George Rojas, Dan Moreland. EMLL. The March 29 Arena Mexico show saw them start a new feud involving Leo Del Santo against Felino, who is generally considered one of the best workers in EMLL but has never gotten a big push. In the main event, Felino and El Satanico and Dr. Wagner Jr. beat Santo and Atlantis and Dos Caras, with Felino beating Santo in the third fall. Solar returned on that show teaming with La Fiera and Mascara Magica for a DQ win over Fuerza Guerrera, Archangel and Black Panther. They also started a Mascara Año 2000 and Universo 2000 feud with Rayo de Jalisco Jr. and Atlantis on March 26 at Arena Coliseo during a tag match which saw all four issue mask and hair challenges back and forth afterwards. AAA. Eddie Guerrero returns after more than a one-year absence, coming in as a heel on April 7 in Ciudad Juarez, teaming with the Killer to face Conan and La Parca. Guerrero got his career started in Juarez, and his nephew, Chavito Guerrero, is scheduled to work underneath. Not sure if Guerrero is into work an angle for Triple Mania since the show is a television taping, or he's just working the show because he lives nearby. Juarez is the border town across from El Paso. The tentative Chicago Triple Mania date has been changed to May 18th, and they are talking of running a show at the Olympic Auditorium in Los Angeles on May 17th and 3 June shows in Texas. Woman will be working as a valet on some of these shows since John Arezzi is involved in the promotion of the shows. The other major show for this coming week will be April 5th in Nezahualcóyotl with two hair versus hair matches involving the Diabolicos versus Diabolicos feud, with Marabunta versus Rocky Santana and Mr. Condor versus Gallego. Main event for the show is Octagon and Ultimo Dragon and Pantera teaming up for the first time. They are going to be pushed as a regular trio against Pierroth Jr. and Psicosis and Heavy Metal. They've already started programming Psicosis with Dragon. The March 29th show in Tijuana drew about 2,050, which was about half the crowd of the March 16th show. There was little walk-up, apparently because the day of the show, rival promoter Rey Mysterio got an article in the local newspaper about how WWO, EMLL and WWF would be combining for a show at the Tijuana Bull Ring, the building where Conan and Jake Roberts did their hair match in 1994. On May 5th. May 5th in Mexico is equivalent to July 4th in the United States, and that it's the big independence holiday of the year. No word on exactly how WWF fits into this, although the WWO is said to have been negotiating to use WWF talent of late, and WWF sources say they don't know anything about this show, and many are surmising it'll actually be ex-WWFers like Tito Santana, and not people like Jim Hellwig or Shawn Michaels. It was a series of trios matches, some of which were very good and some of which weren't, with all the teams wrestling twice. All the matches were one fall. Best match I was told was Psicosis and Juventud Guerrera and Halloween over Rey Mysterio Jr. and Super Colo, who seemed to be injured, and Leon Negro in a 4 stars match which had no missed spots, but it was a one-fall match going 10 minutes. There were 3 upsets in the second portion of the card as national heels Pierroth Jr. and Cibernetico and Heavy Metal lost to locals Genghis Khan and Negro Azteca and Depredator when Depredator made Heavy submit. And then Mysterio Jr. and Colo and Negro were held to a double pin draw against the X-Men in a match where it was clear the X-Men were out of their leagues, and finally Conan and Octagon and La Parca lost to Los Pandilleros when Parca was pinned after Psicosis interfered and hit him with a chair. Then they added an impromptu lumberjack match with Conan and Parca and Octagon beating Psicosis and Halloween and Guerrera, which was said to have been very good. Overall the show was good, but not at the level of some of the recent shows. A correction from 2 weeks back. When writing about the Psicosis Damien match on March 16th, we incorrectly wrote that Psicosis moonsaulted Damien through 2 tables. Actually it was a frontward splash off the top through the 2 tables. All Japan. Carnival Tournament standings as of the April 1st show in Osaka are: Gary Albright 5-0-2, 12 points. Steve Williams 4-0-2, 10 points. Kenta Kobashi 4-1-1, 9 points. Stan Hansen 3-1-0, 6 points. Johnny Ace 2-1-2, 6 points. Toshiaki Kawada 2-1-1, 5 points. Mitsuharu Misawa 21-1, 5 points. Akira Tao 0-1-3, 3 points. The Patriot 14-0, 2 points. Takao Mori 1-4-0, 2 points. Jun Akiyama 1-5-0, 2 points. Tamon Honda 06-0, 0 points. Actually, considering the quality of the lineups on the tour, the crowds this past week have been somewhat disappointing. That may be due to the fact they've run too many 30-minute draws starting early in the tour, so people are picking up the pattern of protection. All Japan's strong suit in the past in these type of tournaments have been very few draws and clean finishes, and they've already had 6 matches go to 30-minute draws in the first 10 days. This week's shows saw on March 28th in Isazaki before 2,300, Albright used the cross armbreaker submission on Omori in 6:56, Kobashi pinned Honda in 16:31 and Hansen pinned Akiyama with a lariat in 17:02. March 29 in Nagaoka before 2,900 saw Ace pin Honda in 12:31, Williams pinned Patriot in 16:04 and Albright pinned Kawada using a dragon suplex in 17:38 in their second ever singles meeting. March 30 in Fukui before 2,500 saw Omori pin Honda in 14:16. Ace went to a 30-minute draw with Albright and Kobashi pinned Patriot in 18:07. One of the biggest shows of the tour was March 31 in Nagoya before 6,500, which is a good crowd for All Japan in Nagoya since Nagoya traditionally is a city that really only draws big for New Japan. Williams pinned Honda in 4:57 with a Dr. Bomb, Albright pinned Akiyama in 8:19 with a German suplex, Kawada and Tao went to a 30-minute draw and Misawa pinned Kobashi with a flying clothesline off the top rope in 24:07. Misawa Kobashi is the only tournament match to air on television as of this point as it aired later that evening. Reports are that it was an excellent match. The March 24th show was supposed to air Tao vs Kobashi from opening night, but for some reason it instead ran some horrible matches involving the likes of Giant Baba and Abdullah the Butcher from the last Budokan Hall. April 1st in Osaka drew a disappointing 4,850 at Furitsu Gym considering the lineup had 4 important tourney matches including the first meeting of Williams vs Albright. Kawada pinned Akiyama in 1:54 after a high kick and a big shocker because it was so short considering the men involved, but that's probably a good idea because the All Japan matches with the top guys of late don't get heat until the 15-minute call because everyone knows they aren't going to the finish before then, so they need something to get heat early. In addition, the other matches on the show were long since Williams and Albright went the full 30 minutes. Kobashi pinned Hansen with a powerbomb in 22:15 and Misawa pinned Tao in 18:18 with a flying clothesline. March 17 TV did a 1.8 rating while March 24 did a 3.1. New Japan. The Tokyo Dome show on April 29 supposedly has a monster advance, although I don't have a number to verify that other than it is more than 30,000 tickets but isn't sold out yet. The remaining 3 matches on the card are to be announced this week with them putting a lot of hype on who Riki Choshu will end up facing. It was announced on Tatsumi Fujinami's April 7th show in Osaka that Fujinami and Shiro Koshinaka would face the war team of Koki Kitahara and Nobutaka Araya. The feud between New Japan and Weekly Pro Wrestling magazine continues. Weekly Pro, in its first issue since being given the word they would no longer get any press credentials or access to New Japan, had no coverage, even with telephoto shots, of the major New Japan shows which included a March 20th Nagoya and March 26th Tokyo. The belief in Japan appears to be that Weekly Pro readers are tremendously loyal, said to be similar to Observer readership or ECW fandom, and that something like this, even without coverage of the top promotion in the country, won't hurt readership, and in the short term the feud may help readership. However, the belief is that if New Japan gets its sister groups like UWFI and other groups to join in the long run it would hurt the publication. New Japan wants editor Tarzan Yamamoto out and would consider it a victory in the war if that occurs and would give Weekly Pro access once again. However, those close to Weekly Pro point out they've been in this situation before where they've had heat with promotions including with All Japan in the late 80s, and in every case, they've won in the end as the promotion after being shut out of news in the most read weekly mag in the country, has invited them back. March 16th TV show did a 2.1 rating while the March 23rd show did in 0.4. Don't know what caused the latter number because it's unusually horrible. Other Japan notes. FMW held a press conference on April 1st in Tokyo to build up the Kawasaki Stadium show. The main event angle started on the March 30th Korakuen Hall show. In the main event, the Headhunters captured the World Brass Knucks tag titles, beating Super Leather and Jason the Terrible, and continued beating on them after the match. Hayabusa then did a run-in. It wound up with manager Victor Quiñones showing 10 million yen in cash, roughly $95,000, and saying he would send Mr. Pogo and a mystery partner against any 2 men from FMW. Masato Tanaka of FMW got on the mic and asked Hayabusa to be his partner but called him Izaki, which is his real last name, I guess to make it a shoot-style angle. The gimmick is that Quiñones wanted FMW to match the cash outlay and have a 20 million yen winner-take-all main event. The storyline is that FMW can't come up with the money, so Onita came to the press conference to help the company out and said that he would hold an auction to raise the money and sell his 2 championship belts that he retired with and sell the ring gown that he wore in his final match last year at Kawasaki Stadium to help raise the money. Sounds like a telethon for sleaze. At the press conference the hint was that Onita wouldn't wrestle on the card, but would be doing this to help FMW out, and that Hayabusa would team with Tanaka against Pogo and a mystery partner in an explosive barbed wire match, and that Combat Toyota would face Megumi Kudo in the first ever women's explosive barbed wire match. There will be a multi-promotion show on June 30th at the Yokohama Arena as a Rikidozen Memorial Show. No word on which companies will be involved. All Japan Women, which have a top 15 ratings, made a change in their WWA title rules in that the champion formerly could only defend against one of the top 3 contenders from their promotion or the top star of a rival promotion, but starting this month it's been changed to any of the top 5 rated contenders in their promotion. Their biggest shows upcoming are April 7th in Osaka, where Yumiko Hata puts her number 3 rating up against Tomoka Watanabe, and April 9th at Korakuen Hall with Kyoko Inoue and Takako Inoue defending the WWA tag titles against Reggie Bennett and Watanabe, and Manami Toyota and Kaoru Ito versus Asia Kong and Mima Shimoda. Toyota will wrestle Bison Kimura of Yoshimoto Pro on the Yoshimoto Show on April 14th in Tokyo. Added to the War April 19th show in Sapporo, which originally was headlined by Genichiro Tenryu versus Mr. Pogo, is a War 6-man title match with Geto and Jado and Hiromichi Fuyuki versus Masa Chono and Hiroyoshi Tenzan and Hiro Saito, Rey Mysterio Jr. versus Psychosis, and Lionheart and Damien versus Ultimo Dragon and Yuji Yasuhiro. The other major show of that War tour is April 26th at Korakuen Hall with Tenryu versus Big Titan, Fuyuki versus Nobutaka Araya, Psychosis and Damien versus Mysterio Jr. and Ultimo Dragon, and Geto and Jado versus Koki Kitahara and Yasuhiro. War announced a show for April 21st at Tokyo Sumo Hall, but no lineup was announced. Lance Storm and Yasuhiro captured the International Junior Tag Team titles from Geto and Lion Do Chris Jericho on March 27th in Nagoya. On that show, Big Titan joined Fuyuki Gun to set up a match on March 31st at Korakuen Hall. On that show, after Tenryu pinned Kitahara, Titan attacked him. Titan then teamed with Fuyuki and Jado in the main event to beat Yasuhiro and Araya and Koji Kiao. Titan, when he teams with Fuyuki Gun, will be called Taito, similar to how Chris Jericho is Lionheart in most of his matches, but when he's in a tag with members of Fuyuki Gun, he's Lion Do. IWA opened its new tour on April 1st at Korakuen Hall with Terry Gordy, Tracy Smothers, Tiger Jeet Singh and Freddy Krueger Doug Gilbert as the foreigners. USWA The Cyberpunks PG-13 Under Masks captured the USWA tag titles from Doug Gilbert and Tommy Rich on March 25th in Memphis, since Gilbert was leaving for an IWA tour. The house was poor again, although we don't have a figure. Not that it's going to be any better this week, as the April 1st lineup was Reggie B. Fine versus Tony Williams, Bill Dundee versus David Haskins, a triangle match with Samantha Payne, Miss Texas and Brandon Baxter, Cyberpunks defending the tag titles against Headbangers, Jesse James Armstrong versus Rich, Men on a Mission versus Brian Christopher and Moondog Spot, and an added match of Dundee versus whatever they are calling Wolfie D under the hood. They did an angle where Brandon Baxter said he's now managing Dundee and that he's not a second match wrestler. Samantha came out and said that she was the one and only manager of Dundee. Finally, Dundee came out and said that he's talked with Baxter, but he's not his manager, which ended up with Samantha and Baxter feuding and Miss Texas getting involved as well. Dundee is now being called the Man. Next thing he'll be saying he's custom made from head to toe. Men on a Mission were threatening Christopher, saying that they knew with Lawler gone for WWF TV that he wouldn't have a partner, and Moondog Spot came in and attacked them with objects. The April 13th television show will be the 1000th live pro wrestling show on WMC TV in Memphis, and they'll be doing a special show for that. ECW The March 30th show at the ECW Arena was an interesting test, since most of the good working regulars of late, such as Chris Jericho, Rey Mysterio Jr., Juventud Guerrera, and even Sabu, were unavailable. Very little was hyped about the card except for the 6-man main event. ECW officials are claiming the crowd at 1,148, although the several reports we received all said the crowd was 300 or more down from the previous show, with estimates ranging from 750 to 1,000, and the heat and work were way down from the hot show on March 9th. Among the highlights were Joey Styles in the introduction telling fans that ECW would be on network TV starting April 5th, well, Prime Network, and that they were setting up their first pay-per-view show. Damian Kane then did a long interview where he destroyed El Puerto Ricano and said he was going to prove how tough he was, and finally Mikey Whipwreck accepted his challenge and ended up pinning him. The fans hated Kane, although I was told his work was solid. JT Smith beat Hack Myers in a stretcher match by working over Hack's legit bad shoulder. Taz beat Bubba Ray Dudley in a quick match. Even though Bubba is the face and Taz is supposed to be the most hated heel in the company with Bill Alfonso in his corner,
The cheers were 60% pro Taz, which a lot of fans felt was the sign that the bug gimmick has run its course.
Gangstas beat Blue Meanie and Chad Austin, subbing for Stevie Richards, who suffered a broken orbital bone in his eye the night before. Austin came out with a crew cut and called himself Stone Cold Chad Austin. Patricia came out as Meanie's girlfriend, which drove Richards crazy. Gangstas totally destroyed them with stiff blows with objects. After the match, New Jack said he ran into Johnny Grunge, who told him what he's now doing is entertainment, and wanted to ask Austin if he was just entertained, and challenged Eliminators for the belts. Eliminators then defended against a team called the Dark Riders, who were Billy Black and the Punisher from SMW. It was a short match. Punisher has potential and Black showed some good moves. Too Cold Scorpio retained the TV title, beating Rob Van Dam. The match was supposed to go 29-59 with them teasing the draw but doing the pin at the end. The match had a lot of good moves but lacked in psychology, and the crowd reactions weren't much. When they announced 5 minutes left, the crowd booed because they were thinking draw. At the 10-second announcement, Scorpio went to the finish, but it took him 15 seconds to do it and everyone knew it. Van Dam got a great ovation for doing the job and worked very hard. Eliminators and Gangstas did a brawl which ended up with them making a New Jack sandwich between two tables and then doing the total elimination on him. Raven then came out with a special boot, sounds like the old loaded boot gimmick, with a doctor talking about his injury. I guess he messed up his foot at the last set of shows when he worked on it with gout, so the injury is legit, although the special boot part isn't. It wound up in a 6-way brawl with Raven and Bruise Brothers against Tommy Dreamer and Shane Douglas and Sandman, which saw Brian Lee debut and attack Dreamer. They wound up having Raven put Douglas through a table. Douglas put Raven through a door that they had pulled off a wall. They went through a wall. Lee ran out and destroyed Dreamer, and Sandman saved him with his cane. Bruise Brothers went to crotch Dreamer, but Sandman saved him again. Then when they went to crotch Sandman, Douglas ignored it and pinned Raven instead of saving him. Next show is April 20th with Raven defending against Douglas and Dreamer vs. Lee. Other upcoming shows are April 12th in Glenolden, Pennsylvania with Dreamer and Pitbulls vs. Lee and Bruise Brothers, Sabu vs. Black, Raven vs. Axel Rotten for the title, Scorpio vs. Bubba for the TV title, Taz vs. Jericho and Gangstas vs. Bad Crew, April 13th in Queens, New York with Gangstas, Headhunters and Sandman and Scorpio in a 3-way dance, Dreamer and Pitbulls vs. Lee and Bruise Brothers, Sabu vs. Whipwreck, Raven vs. Bubba for the title, Eliminators vs. Black and Punisher, and April 19th in Plymouth Meeting, Pennsylvania with Raven vs. Dreamer and a lumberjack match for the title, Taz vs. Whipwreck, Scorpio vs. Sabu for TV title, Gangstas vs. Black and Punisher and Pitbulls vs. Bad Crew. Sports Channel Ohio, Prime Sports West and Sports South will all debut ECW at 2 a.m. on Friday nights starting this weekend. For whatever this is worth, there were no Brian Pillman spots on the ECW television show this week after 3 spots airing the week before, and Pillman nor anyone representing him were at the ECW Arena show over the weekend. Louis Spicolli missed his scheduled debut this past weekend due to breaking an ankle in midweek. Here and there. The second Pancrase pay-per-view show, which will be the May 16th show from Budokan Hall, will air in June. An interesting show is taking place on April 20th in New Providence on the island of Nassau in the Bahamas. What's interesting about the show is it is being staged by Titan Sports and promoted by Hal Jeffrey according to a newspaper article, but the lineup consists of Bam Bam Bigelow vs. Warlord, Medusa vs. Unknown, Nasty Boys vs. Bruise Brothers, Jim Duggan vs. Brutus Beefcake, Hercules vs. Brian Blair and Jim Neidhart vs. Doink the Clown. Sunshine Wrestling Federation on April 20th in Fort Myers has Hercules, hey, isn't he billed in Nassau that same night? Versus Cuban Assassin on top. A group called Mid-American Wrestling did its own spoof match with the original Huckster vs. Nacho Randy on March 29th in West Allis. Randy was a guy with a bad fake beard. Huckster was a short AWA jobber from the 70s. The two went out and botched spots on purpose until local manager The Hustler said that you two idiots are going to ruin my chance to becoming WCW booker, and had 2 of his wrestlers destroy both guys with intentionally horrible leg drops and elbows. Special ref Zillionaire Ted was then attacked with a pool cue. The wrestlers found it funny, but most of the fans there didn't get any of it. UFC add the city of Chicago to the places where UFC is banned. The city alderman who wrote the editorial in the Tribune that was printed here last week spearheaded the ordinance, and the council hardly took the ban seriously as there was no discussion and nobody had seen the event on pay-per-view or video. The alderman who wrote the editorial admitted that he had never seen the event but had seen the 2020 piece. Since it is only in the city limits, shows theoretically could be held at the Rosemont Horizon. UFC had no plans for running Chicago, at least in the near future. Bob Merowitz was at a pay-per-view press conference in Orlando which included officials from the Playboy Channel and Intermedia Partners, the cable system out of San Francisco which banned UFC from pay-per-view on its system. Intermedia claimed they had to take a stand and then were asked if they were also going to take a stand and not air Mike Tyson fights, porno films or violent movies, and they didn't take that stand. Apparently Don Frye was at the event and said that he personally was uncomfortable with the cowboy and Indian movies since he's part Cherokee and wondered why the companies were talking about banning that. WCW. Boy, was Nitro a strange show on April 1st from Cleveland before nearly 7,000 fans, 3,831 paying $47,000. The Giant, who just turned face 7 days earlier in a great turn, turned back heel again. He was supposed to team with Sting against Harlem Heat. However, Jimmy Hart paid off Heat to walk out and then Giant turned on Sting.
They had a decent 241 before Lex Luger saved Sting, who wasn't in all that much trouble to begin with since he was on a fence at the time, for the DQ.
Hart then told Luger he'd be sorry. 1/4 of 1 star. A triangle match with Nasty Boys, Steiners and Road Warriors ended when Scott Steiner pinned Johnny Grunge, who was dressed up to look like Brian Knobbs in 1549. All the spots were good and stiff, but the match didn't build to anything.
Somehow it was discovered that the team that attacked the Nasty Boys a few weeks back wasn't Steiners or Warriors but was Public Enemy, 3 stars. Hogan and Booty Man beat Arnold Anderson and Kevin Sullivan in 7:46 when Hogan pinned Sullivan after hitting him with Kimberly's shoe. Kevin was about to use Woman's Show, who made the save when Liz apparently couldn't get her shoe off in time. After Anderson caused Giant to turn on Sullivan last week, there was no acknowledgement of that nor any dissension between Anderson and Sullivan teased during the match, even though they teased it all weekend at the house shows. DUD. After the match, Sullivan and Anderson attacked Booty Man, but it was during the replay, so we actually never saw it. Then Booty and Hogan did a horrible interview challenging them to a rematch next week, which Gene had to point out would be in 2 weeks because there's no show next week. The fans booed Hogan and Booty. The match has secret steps which probably won't be revealed until match time, so Hogan has 2 weeks to figure them out. There is no chemistry whatsoever with the Hogan-Booty-Kimberly trio. Main event saw Ric Flair pin Lex Luger to retain the title in 10:54 when Woman threw coffee in Luger's face, as he had the rack on. Timing was bad since Woman went for the coffee before Luger had the advantage. Standard Flair stuff, 2.5 stars. Since it was the day after Mania, WWF won the Monday Night Wars with a 2.9 rating and 4.2 share to WCW's 2.8 rating and 4.1 share. WCW had a strong lineup as far as marquee name matches to combat Raw's advantage of going after Mania and a couple of title changes. Both numbers were hurt since it went against the NCAA finals. The Nitro replay did a 1.3 rating and 3.6 share. Other weekend numbers for the weekend of March 30th saw Saturday Night do a 2.7 against the NCAA semis, Main Event a 2.1 and Pro a 1.5. Road Warriors gave notice on March 29th, but everyone kissed and made up on April 1st. Supposedly the problem was over what they had heard Ramon and Diesel were getting as compared with what they knew they were getting. For the first quarter of 1996, Nitro beat out Raw by a 3.1 to 2.9. The WCW Saturday Night Show for March 30th was taped March 27th in Rome, Georgia before a sellout 3,200 paying $32,000. Some of the bouts will also air in the future. Luger wrestled Giant with Giant managed by Hart and working as the heel, telling the story of the turn a few days later. Hart threw the megaphone into Giant, but Sting intercepted and ran in with the megaphone and the ref saw it. So naturally he awarded the match to Luger via DQ. Which must have made as much sense to the fans live as seeing Hart with Giant and Giant working heel against Luger. Arnold Anderson pinned Steve Armstrong, Jim Duggan pinned David Taylor, Booty Man pinned Max Muscle, Eddie Guerrero pinned Devon Storm, Harlem Heat beat State Patrol, Luger pinned Shark to keep the TV title, Conan beat Pat Tanaka, Belfast Bruiser pinned Bobby Eaton, Giant, this time as a face, pinned Bubba Rogers. American Males beat Barbarian and Mang. Sting pinned Hugh Morris and Ric Flair pinned Dick Slater to keep the title, and in a bout for the future, Conan pinned Storm. Storm missed a moonsault off the top to the floor. Preliminary reports on uncensored buy rate range from 0.65 to 0.85, which is a strong figure, so if any trouble was going to come out of Hogan changing the show at the last minute, it ain't happening now. Nitro on April 15th from Charleston, SC. Besides the Hogan and Booty vs. Sullivan and Anderson will be Sting and Luger vs. Flair and Giant, Savage vs. Barbarian and Nasty Boys vs. Public Enemy. Bobby Heenan did an April Fool's joke on TV announcing he was retiring from the wrestling business. They played it up like he was really quitting to join WWF, just the way Bischoff was asking questions about where are you headed, and then at the end of the show Heenan said it was April Fool's.
Apparently this was done to make fun of the rumor going around that Heenan was going to WWF. Gene Okerlund hinted on the hotline that Ted DiBiase would be coming in as an announcer. While that under normal circumstances can be dismissed, in this case there may be something to it. DiBiase's contract with Titan doesn't expire until the fall. There has been talk that at that point he may come to WCW as an announcer and be called Zillionaire Ted. WCW will be doing a 4-day swing in the Northeast on June 28th in Hartford, June 29th in Philadelphia, June 30th at the Paramount in Madison Square Garden, and Nitro on July 1st from the U.S. Air Arena in Landover, Maryland. Since the two shows started in September, Nitro's edge is 2.7 to 2.6. The refs on television are noticeably wearing earpieces so they can get the signal from the back to tell the guys to go home. WCW ran house shows over the weekend on March 30th in Columbus and March 31st in Dayton. Heard the former was terrible and the latter was a great house show. Columbus did $3,300 paying $40,000 with Savage winning via a reverse decision DQ over Flair when Flair got the pin but was caught afterwards having used an object.
Sting vs. Giant was the scheduled semifinal, but they announced it wouldn't take place because Sting and Giant were friends, so Giant instead wrestled Renegade in the semi, and you can imagine how good that was.
Sting, Luger, Woman, and Liz all no-showed.
Don't know what the deal was with Sting and Luger, but they were in Dayton the next night. Woman and Liz aren't being sent to house shows.
In addition, the Road Warriors vs. Anderson and Sullivan match only went 1 minute with the latter team teasing a breakup. Dayton drew 4,700 paying $54,000. Flair and Savage had a 4 stars match with the same finish.
They again announced Sting vs. Giant wouldn't take place because they were now friends, so Sting beat Dick Slater and Giant again beat Renegade.
Eddie Guerrero, Dean Malenko and Chris Benoit all missed the weekend shows because Malenko was married over the weekend. As part of the deal to get Halloween Havoc into Caesars Palace in Vegas on October 27th and get the $300,000 sponsorship deal on the show from Slim Jim's, WCW had to promise both the site and Slim Jim's the first Hogan vs. Savage match. WCW Saturday Night This Weekend, taped April 3rd in Gainesville, Georgia, has Luger vs. Giant, Savage vs. Scott Norton, and Flair vs. Booty Man. WWF. From the Raw taping on April 1st in San Bernardino, California, before a sellout of approximately 3,000 paying $31,986.
They opened with Mankind, who got no reaction except for a half-dozen ECW fans in the front row chanting "He's hardcore," beating Bob Holly with the finishing move of sticking his fingers down Holly's throat.
Mark Mero debuted pinning Isaac Yankem. Mero tried all his signature spots, but between working with Yankem and being used to a ring with tighter ropes, not all of them looked as good as they usually do. He got a good reaction because everyone knew him as Johnny B. Bad. Helmsley's girl Sable was at ringside cheering for Mero. When Helmsley tried to take her away from ringside, she slapped him in the face and left with Mero. Bodidonas beat Aldo Montoya and Barry Horowitz in a good squash. Michaels did an interview. He got a good reaction, but not as good as you'd think. There were a lot of negative posters regarding Michaels from Hart fans, and Titan officials were confiscating them, and it was described to me as almost violently confiscating them. Undertaker pinned Justin Bradshaw with the tombstone, and Mankind attacked Undertaker and left him laying after the match. Undertaker and Ultimate Warrior both got much bigger pops than Michaels. For future shows, Ahmed Johnson beat Davey Boy Smith in an arm wrestling match. Owen Hart did a good job interfering early. Shane McMahon was the ref. After Johnson won, Smith did the obligatory post-match attack with the chair and table. Vader beat Yokozuna by coming down on his knee. They are doing a Yokozuna injury angle from this, as he was carried out in a forklift, since who could find a stretcher big enough for him, or find people strong enough to carry it without destroying their backs? Actually, they are sending him to a weight loss place basically to not only allow him to work like he did when he weighed only 490, but to probably save his life both when it comes to quality and quantity of life. Johnson and Jake Roberts beat Owen Hart and Smith when Johnson pinned Hart with the Pearl River Plunge. Lots of stalling. Warrior did his interview to an enormous reaction. His interview made no sense. Goldust came out and had to carry the segment. Warrior said a few naughty words and then beat up Goldust, who ran off. Angle was good. Helmsley pinned Duke Dries in a match with no heat. Goldust defended the IC belt against Savio Vega. It was a good but not great match. There was a huge faggot chant during the match, and it was very disturbing to see 7- and 8-year-old kids doing it and mothers doing it in front of kids. Some may pass it off as just being wrestling,
But if you were black or of any ethnic or racial minority or knew someone of that minority and went to an event where young children fans were chanting spick or nigger or slant eyes, it would be disturbing, and no matter how people may try to rationalize this, it is the same thing. After a ref bump, Goldust brought the belt into the ring, but Vega got it, used it, and pinned him to win the title. They announced a title switch, but Gorilla Monsoon came out and announced he was stripping Goldust of the title. Funny, since at this point Vega was the champ, and it would be held up pending a rematch next week. Mero pinned Leif Cassidy in a so-so match. Steve Austin pinned Bart Gunn in a dead match. Jim Cornette did an awesome interview building toward the Vader-Ramon match. Cornette basically buried Ramon with inside references and said Ramon made the worst career decision, then paused, and said he meant by signing the match with Vader, and said that after the match, there would be no more Razor Ramon. Godwin's did a squash. Sonny came out, but Hillbilly Jim chased. That's not exactly the right word since Jim doesn't move well anymore. Her away. After the match, Body Donnas attacked Godwin's and left them laying. Mankind, who got no heat even though he did the Undertaker angle, pinned Montoya. Goldust regained the title, beating Vega in another good match. Marlena distracted the ref, allowing Austin, who was with DiBiase at ringside, to use his $1 million belt and hit Vega, and he was pinned. I'll bet you're wondering why Monsoon didn't come back and hold up the title again. Vader destroyed Fatu, and after he did a moonsault, he got a total babyface reaction. Apparently he was supposed to win with the Vader bomb, but as he climbed, the crowd started chanting moonsault and he decided to oblige them. Michaels pinned Jerry Lawler with a superkick to keep the title. After the match, Diesel, who was doing color, hit the ring. They were brawling when Kurt Hennig, who was telling people he would be coming back to the ring fairly soon, threw the title belt to Diesel, who KO'd Michaels with it, and dropped the belt on him. The match itself had lots of Lawler stalling. Michaels did an interview, and then off camera, appeared to lose it because he started saying F you and blow me to the fans that were booing him. He better realize quick that part of what goes with being the top guy is you gain enemies. Warrior beat Goldust via count out in a title match with a walkout finish. Warrior got a big pop coming in, but nothing close to the pop he got the first time out. Match was short, terrible, and had no heat. Finale was supposed to be a triple threat match with the champ, Diesel, and Undertaker, but it was switched to Undertaker versus Vader. Undertaker pinned him with a choke slam after kicking out of the Vader bomb. No billionaire Ted skit, and I'm assuming that's history. Slammy Awards on March 30th on USA were as follows: Best Bun Sonny, Best Ring Entrance Michaels, Best Finishing Move Bret Hart, Crime of Century Vader attacking Monsoon, New Sensation Johnson, who in his interview called WCW Wheelchair Championship Wrestling, I Can't Shut Up Award Lawler. Best Threads Michaels, Worst Threads Cornette, Manager of the Year Sonny, Lifetime Achievement Award to Fred Blassie, which I was told was the highlight of the show. Most embarrassing Lawler kissing his own feet. They aired a new blowaway diet with a still rotund but much older Buddy Rose. Shock of the Year Michaels collapsing. Best Ring Mechanic Michaels, Best Music Video Bret Hart, Match of the Year Michaels vs. Ramon Ladder Match, Leader of New Generation Michaels. Since these awards are voted on in the 900 number, by law they have to be shoots. Well, there are a lot of things done in wrestling that are probably technically illegal. Anyway, the plan was to do a 900 vote during the show to vote for the greatest WWF champion of all time and have the nominees be Hogan, Yokozuna, Bret, Bruno Sammartino, and Bob Backlund, with the idea that Bret would win and from that point forward he'd be billed as the greatest WWF champion of all time. I guess somebody got cold feet, afraid that perhaps Hogan might win, because at the last minute it was changed to which WWF champion in the room is most likely headed to the Hall of Fame, with Bret, Diesel, Undertaker, Yokozuna, and Backlund, which Bret won. Vader is expected to file suit against WCW for breach of contract. Slammies did a 1.7 rating while Mania did a 1.3 and Action Zone a 1.6, all numbers lower than you'd expect for WrestleMania weekend. The readers' pages. ECW. I feel obliged as an ECW fan to take a stab at Oliver Kopp's attack on ECW in the February 5th issue. Kopp starts by attacking Shane Douglas and the praise he received in ECW. His displeasure with Douglas seems to stem from his so-called lackluster performance in the WWF. First, one can't take away the fact Douglas put on great matches in ECW as well as great interviews. Perhaps I'm following on a great conspiracy theory, but I had the feeling WWF was holding back Douglas to undermine ECW. Why did they straddle him with that lame Dean gimmick? Why did they push Savio Vega and job out Douglas? The gimmick wasn't Douglas' fault. Was he ever really injured? Only he knows for sure, but I know his ECW performances were better than 95% of anything that has been in the WWF in a long time.
Cop then had the audacity to attack a tag team that has made a name for themselves but provided entertainment for everyone. Sick of the drivel American fans have been force-fed for the past 10 years. Public Enemy. One has to watch very few ECW matches to see how hard these two worked. You speak of the lack of reaction in WCW as if it were their fault.
I don't seem to remember 1 ounce of build-up prior to their arrival in WCW. Since then they've put on a good performance at the Clash and in interviews.
The problem was when they were forced to hurry through matches and held back on how much furniture they could bring in.
Let them go all out and everyone will see why they have been so hailed for the last couple of years.
The attacks on Sandman are also misguided.
Sandman is willing and able to take some of the craziest bumps around. Is he as good as an athlete as the team you called the second best team in WCW, American Males?
No. But he does try harder.
There is no doubt Sandman and Public Enemy put forth tenfold the effort of the American Males. As for Paul Heyman, if being extremely creative and being the best booker around is a crime, he'd serve a life term.
If making struggling wrestlers into stars that the big two drool over is a crime, he should sit next to Ted Bundy.
I seem to detect a double standard among Japanese wrestling snobs. Don't get me wrong, New Japan and All Japan women provide great wrestling and I enjoy them.
However, there is more to hardcore wrestling. Part of what we crave is ECW action, filled with high spots, violence, great angles and incredible ring work. That's why ECW fans embrace wrestlers as different as Guerrero, Malenko, Raven, Douglas, Mysterio, Psychosis, Sandman, and Cactus Jack. Like Dusty Rhodes, the Japan snobs are behind the times when it comes to the current tastes among wrestling fans. Bill Lynn. St. Genevieve, Missouri.
Refunds with a smile?
How about refunds with an argument?
I attended the ECW show at Lost Battalion Hall in Queens on March 8th.
I purchased tickets from Ticketmaster that were presumably second row. There was no seating chart at Ticketmaster, so that should have given me an indication of what I was in for. My $35 second row ringside seat turned out to be in a section with a diagonal view of the ring. I was willing to live with that. Then I realized there was an inordinate amount of space between the front row of my section at the ringside barrier.
I once again wasn't pleased but was willing to live with it. I assumed that people might run up to the barrier during introductions but would return to their seats afterwards.
Annoying, but once I was willing to live with to see a great card. However, people started planting chairs between the first row and the ringside barrier. There was no security to stop them.
There was almost a fight in front of my fiancée and me even before the card started.
A gentleman in front or me got pretty upset when someone from several rows back planted a seat right in front of his first row view. Was that fight broken up by security? No. It was broken up by a friend of the fan. I was at wit's end at this point. The best was yet to come. After the first match, a kid again planted a seat in front of the front row, which totally blocked my view. He claimed he worked at the building and felt he was entitled to sit there. That was it. I decided that no night at ECW wrestling, no matter how good, was worth this. I went up to the ticket window and demanded a refund. The lady behind the booth referred me to a gentleman who looked like Paul Heyman will in 30 years.
This man was extremely standoffish with me when I told him about the situation.
He kept asking me questions as if we were playing a game.
What was wrong with your seat? What is blocking your view?
Why did someone get into a fight?
I finally had to say I was being very respectful to him, not cursing, even though I was ready to flip out.
I just told them I had just about enough and wanted my money back. I explained that the promotion has a policy of offering refunds if even one wrestler doesn't show up. He didn't know about this policy. I also mentioned about a woman receiving a refund because she brought her child to ECW and decided to leave because it was too violent. During our delightful conversation, this gentleman told me he is putting up half the money for this group. I then told him that I love the promotion and will continue to support it, just not at this venue. After several minutes of what felt like haggling and a display of my seating situation, he told that I do not agree with you, but I will give you your money back. This is what I had to go through to get a refund. The Lost Battalion Hall is the worst place I've ever seen to see a wrestling show. Any large high school gym would be better than this place. The show also started a half hour late and they made all 1,000 people, whether they had a ticket or not, walk through one single door on a freezing evening. ECW wrestling is great if you can actually see it. I'll continue to support this group by buying videos or going to the ECW arena until they get a better venue in New York. Name withheld by request.
I have news for all the wrestlers contemplating leaving ECW to go into WWF and WCW.
Shane Douglas left and came back. Sabu left and came back.
Don't feel surprised if you find yourself yearning to go back to that dingy ECW arena again, because you will never ever find fans like ECW's anywhere else. To the critics who put down ECW's violence, that is why it's so exciting and popular. At the last WWF house show I attended, there were more ECW t-shirts than WWF t-shirts, and the ECW fans took over the arena with our chants, and this was a New Haven, a mecca of WWF wrestling.
It is also evident that ECW is on the rise when both WWF and WCW incorporate the ECW style into their PPVs.
I have to disagree with you, because since Roman times, people want to see people get hurt and get beaten up.
That's why people watch pro wrestling. That's why they watch UFC. That's why they watch boxing. That's why we slow down at car wrecks. It's human nature. Also, ECW does have plenty of technically brilliant matches. It's just that they are overshadowed by the wilder antics. Zero Festa. Hamden, Connecticut. I'm getting a little tired of reading about how great and revolutionary ECW is. While I agree it is good in some ways, let's get real.
Paul Heyman has been given way too much credit for his booking.
Many of the matches have massive amounts of interference, and there are constant screw job finishes.
I'd like someone to explain to me the difference between Heyman's screw job finishes and the screw job finishes on WCW Nitro and Raw. I've read Heyman criticizing WWF and WCW for screw job finishes.
Maybe he should practice what he preaches.
As for his great character development, give me a break. Bubba Ray Dudley?
He's a total embarrassment. The so-called hardcore fans of ECW love him, but these same fans would call him a complete embarrassment if he was in WCW or WWF. Talk about a bunch of brainwashed hypocrites. Everyone talks about how over all the wrestlers are to their audience.
The audience is only 1,000 people.
Big deal if the fans chant the wrestler's name or the promotion's name. Go to any WWF house show and all the babyfaces can get their names chanted. As for the revolutionary television, that's also a joke.
Best TV show in the world? I think not. They produce 1 hour of television per week.
It should be good, especially since it's taped at the major house show. If WWF or WCW produced 1 hour a week, I think that hour would also be pretty good. In fact, I find Raw and Nitro more exciting, and those companies have many other shows to produce every week. I'd like someone to explain to me how showing the same videotape commercials, old clips, Joey Styles yelling, and annoying Pulp Fiction music is revolutionary. As for the ECW fans, they are the biggest bunch of hypocrites in wrestling.
They chanted you sold out to wrestlers who would actually like to earn real money. Those fans actually expected Public Enemy, Eddie Guerrero, Dean Malenko to continue wrestling in a bingo hall for the rest of their career and not take the opportunity that they've been working their whole lives to achieve.
The ECW fans who call themselves hardcores are really just another group of brainwashed marks.
A hardcore fan is someone who has been following wrestling a long time and appreciates seeing a good wrestling match.
Hardcore is loving the sport of pro wrestling, not only loving it if someone bleeds or is pummeled with a chair or some other weapon. These people actually believe what Paul Heyman tells them, which makes them bigger marks than the WWF and WCW fans who at least don't believe what the promotion tells them. If these fans left their little dream hardcore world, they would realize that WWF and WCW have better wrestlers and better matches, don't spill outrageous quantities of blood or need to use weapons to have a good match. As for the supposed ECW pay-per-view show, that's another joke. A company that has never drawn 2,000 fans to a show now wants to run a pay-per-view? They think they are bigger than they really are. Kirk Pileski. East Sandwich, Massachusetts.